Yes.
The Leaf Green Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. This is Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1621 of the War News stream. And tonight we have very big news out of Ukraine and Russia, and a little bit of news out of Iran that could drive people crazy. But meanwhile, we are seeing that a huge Russian convoy was destroyed, apparently after an ambush took place near Crimea, and the footage coming out of that whole situation is absolutely insane. We've also seen that Putin has begun panicking after Ukraine's deployed brand new secret drones that looks like a stealth F-117, very weird drone flying around today. And also, Belarus deployed new assault units near the Ukrainian border, and we have more news on that, and it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news from around the world as we have been able to hear significant developments from Eastern Europe, from the ongoing war in Ukraine, and also from the Middle East as well, as several updates have come out today showing that the situation with the ongoing quote-unquote peace talks will most likely not be peaceful or lasting that long. And we also have been able to hear of some additional information out of the Mediterranean Sea as well. Over the course of the past 24 hours, Ukrainian armed forces have been conducting medium and long-range drone strikes against the Russian Federation as a part of their 40-day strike campaign against the country. Currently, the Ukrainian armed forces have been able to slam a large Russian fuel convoy that somehow did make it into the Crimean Peninsula, but almost all the fuel trucks were lost in the subsequent drone attacks that were conducted by the medium-range drone attack forces within the area. Additionally, and simultaneously, a long-range drone and missile strike campaign was being conducted against the Russian Federation within the southern regions of the Volga River, and a large number of drone strikes have been reported on two individual wild berries distribution facilities, one of them in the larger area of Samara and one of them in Saratov. Apparently, one of these attacks within the Saratov area is now using a brand new, up until now, secret Ukrainian drone, which appears to have some form of low visibility design, making it a lot more difficult for it to be detected on radar, or allowing for greater speeds and aerodynamic efficiency, allowing for greater range or speed. We're unsure of which. We have also seen that the Ufa refinery has been hit a second time overnight, and is continuing to burn throughout the day. And we've also seen the remains of the Volgograd wild berries distribution facility also hit just 2 days ago, and it appears that the damage is quite extreme. It appears that the entirety of the wild berries facility has been completely destroyed, knocking out another one of the wild berries company's incredibly vital and important large-scale distribution facilities. We have also been able to see that within the Voronezh area, an interesting clip came out showing an FP-5 Flamingo flying almost like a fighter jet and conducting a low-altitude, high-G maneuver on its side. It was quite an interesting clip to say the least, as it was traveling deeper into the Russian Federation, showing that some of its computer and targeting technology may have been updated since the last times that we've seen the FP-5 Flamingo in use. Additionally, we've also been able to see that major strikes were conducted along the entirety of the Crimean Peninsula, with air defense fire being reported within Feodosia, Simferopol, and explosions being reported within Sevastopol. And we also have noted that the Doman oil loading depot is still on fire as of this day, making it pressingly more difficult for the Russian Federation to be able to use their shadow fleet and to be able to export any kind of oils into the greater world to be able to make any amount of money. And even still, that is becoming more difficult as time passes, as we have been able to see that European forces have boarded an alleged shadow tanker today off of the coast of Italy. In a statement, they've claimed that it is violating sanctions of the European Union on Russian oil, and therefore the vessel is going to be stopped, seized, and inspected to see if it is in violation of the sanctions. The Romanian Air Force also scrambled once again last night due to Russian drone incursions, but we were not able to hear of any of these drones, if my memory serves me correct, being shot down or traveling incredibly deep into Romanian airspace. However, the drones did fly into Romanian airspace for a temporary period, and for that reason alone, Romanian F-16s were scrambled into the skies around the Tulcea County. Additionally, we have also seen that Belarus has now started to create or stand up a new air assault unit within Gomel, about 30 kilometers away from the Ukrainian border, in what may be a slight shift doctrinally or strategically away from the support force, of which the Belarusian armed forces currently are, for the Russian army operating on their territory, and into something more of a slightly independent operational offensive force. We're not entirely sure of that yet, but it is a concerning sign, showing that the Belarusians are attempting to grow and expand the size and capabilities of their actual fighting armed forces. Additionally, outside of all this news in Europe and the Mediterranean and within the Middle East, we have been able to see that the United States of America has finally disclosed why the strikes, which appeared to only be about a few hours away yesterday, were suspended. And it was apparently due to the major protests of not only Saudi Arabia, but a large number of Gulf state nations, of which the United States is using almost all of them to house and operate their forces in their offensive operations against Iran, throwing protest up immediately once they were told that imminently U.S. strikes were going to begin again, as they were stating that the kind of strike campaign that the United States was planning on conducting would most likely see Iran conduct strikes and destroy a large amount of the water desalination plants and power plants within these Gulf state nations, showing that we're most likely expecting at this point, or highly likely believing, that the U.S. was actually going to attempt to blow up a large number of power plants in Tehran, and the Iranians were going to be conducting a reciprocal strike against the Gulf states, which is why they put up such a significant protest, and that they largely told the United States that they tried to go forward with that plan, they were not going to be allowing for it to be conducted from their territory. We have also seen that while the United States, as a result of this, has started to state that they are going to start negotiating with the Iranians, and the Iranians are dying for a deal, the Islamic Republic of Iran's news agencies have made it once again incredibly clear that they will not be reopening the Strait of Hormuz anytime soon. And we have also been able to hear that as well from the Islamic Republic of Iran's capital. They have stated that they are actually preparing preemptive strike plans, so that way if the Islamic Republic of Iran sees the negotiations are not going the way they want them to go, or that the United States isn't conceding as much as they want to concede, then the Islamic Republic of Iran will actually launch surprise attacks against the United States armed forces within the region, which may possibly include, in some insinuated wordage in that statement, a possible ground invasion attempting to target U.S. facilities on the ground in places like Kuwait and Iraq, possibly, if the situation was to get to that point. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear some additional statements that American Airlines has suspended all of their flights up until March 2027 due to the ongoing instabilities within the area, and we've also been able to see that Israel's put out a statement that they will not be stopping their armed conflict in the Gaza Strip until Hamas completely disarms. Significant explosions were also seen around the area of Nabatea today, mostly as a part of IDF tunnel destruction operations, and the Israelis appear to be becoming more and more concerned that the United States of America is generally allowing the Iranians to control the tempo and generally the air of the situation that currently exists within the Middle East because of the ongoing war and the U.S. instability in their decision making. But with all that in mind, folks, it is time for us to get on into all of this news, starting with our largest stories first and then moving our way on down into the smaller stories throughout the night. And we have quite a lot of news to cover tonight, folks, and quite a lot of stuff to break down and analyze as well, particularly from the Middle East, but also from the Ukraine war as well. And moving us on and into our first piece of news, we have been able to see that Ukrainian drone attacks and missile attacks have once again been conducted in large form against the Russian Federation and the occupied territories of Crimea, Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk. From what we understand, hundreds of drones and maybe a dozen missiles or so were fired into the Russian Federation overnight by the armed forces of Ukraine, largely attempting to target oil refineries and wild berries distribution facilities inside of the Russian Federation. And additionally, we also understand that there are strikes that are being conducted against Russian armed forces and logistics facilities within the occupied territories of Crimea, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, and Luhansk. And really quickly, before we continue on with this analysis, Matthew, are you back and can you hear me?
I'm back. I can hear you, but I can tell that there's still lag happening. So apparently it's not my computer. It must be on Discord's end.
Yeah, I think it's Discord. By the way, folks, we were having a small issue with Discord before the beginning of the show, and I restarted my Discord entirely from the ground up, and apparently that hasn't fixed it. Matthew just restarted his Mac completely, and that didn't fix it either. So it's most likely an unfortunate Discord server issue, so we'll just have to kind of power through it regardless of the technical difficulties. So just in advance, folks, I do want to make it clear that there are probably going to be some technical difficulties, especially on Matthew's end of the call that y'all are going to be hearing tonight, and sadly, there's not really anything we can do about that. Also, by the way, before we keep going, there is a fundraiser that we have running right now for none other than Nova Ukraine, an absolutely incredible nonprofit that has been helping to save the lives of many of Ukrainian people, which is so desperately needed due to the Russian ballistic missile attacks that are still being conducted on major cities and are causing significant amounts of casualties, injuries, and also people who are being displaced due to the destruction or complete devastation of their houses. And so please do make sure to support Nova Ukraine, folks. It is an incredible nonprofit, and it certainly does help tremendously. But moving us on out of that brief update and also that return to normalcy, hopefully, that Matthew's back on the call, moving us on into the drone and missile attacks that were conducted throughout the Russian Federation, we were able to see that today's attack is historic and groundbreaking in many different ways, including in the amount of drones and missiles and the types of drones that were being used. One of the more shocking clips that we were able to see, we're believing it's probably from the Tambov-Voronezh region, is of an FP-5 Flamingo of the Ukrainian armed forces flying through the airspace of the area. And we were able to see that this FP-5 Flamingo is pulling off what we could only describe as fighter jet-like maneuvers nearly at low altitude. So, without further ado, here is that clip.
Hey, yo.
I mean, that was crazy.
What in the world? That's not normal for a flamingo. I mean, that thing is barely above the tree line right there, as you can see. That thing is like just barely scooting the top of the trees.
Yeah, so you know what's wild about this clip, folks? As Charles PC throws in a $200 donation over Ukraine. Holy moly! What a humongous!
That's
huge.
Good right there. Look at that. We're almost at $900 raised right now. Actually, that's pretty dang good.
Dang, this early too. That's wild. But one thing that's wild about this clip, folks, is that not only is it flying at an extremely low altitude, it looks to be flying just a little bit above tree line level. We can also see it conduct an interesting maneuver while it's flying. If we notice right here, when it first enters frame, it appears to be flying generally level, where its wings are largely parallel with the surface of the ground. But towards the end of the clip here, we can actually see that when it makes it to this part of the tree line, about right there, it has actually started to conduct a right-hand bank and appears to be turning at around a 30 to 40 degree angle with the ground. So now the wing profile or the wing level is no longer parallel with the ground. It's actually at a 40 degree angle towards the right side. And it looked to be conducting some form of a high-speed medium G turn, probably about 3 Gs, to be able to align onto a target and follow a flight path. This is something that's a little bit new as far as flamingo missiles and their flight performance has been seen, at least on public video and picture evidence, as every other video that we have ever seen of FP5 flamingos generally shows the FP5 flying in a linear line straight from its launch point and directly towards its target, with really no inputs or any changes in flight path being observed along its entire length. So it almost operates on a ballistic trajectory as a cruise missile. However, this is the first video that we've ever seen, and so from this point on, this is giving us a little bit of a change in understanding of how the Flamingo works, that it actually is able to conduct some form of actual maneuvers at certain waypoints. So now we're believing that there may be some sort of a computer update that has been seen in the Tomahawks that are being used to where its software actually allows for certain waypoints to be tabulated inside the computer system, and once it makes it to the GPS coordinates of those waypoints in its flight system, it is actually able to conduct some form of aerobatic maneuvers. Not anything that's defensive, but something that allows for it to conduct anything other than a ballistic trajectory straight from launch point to target. So this is showing us that the Ukrainian armed forces are continuously innovating and upgrading the software and targeting data on board the FP5 Flamingos, and we're expecting that this is because they may be trying to allow for the flight path to be more unpredictable and to make it more difficult for the Russian Federation to try and locate and shoot down flamingos, of which there's been very few interceptions. So it looks like they're trying to maintain the fact that most flamingos make it to their target.
Well, recently there has been some interceptions. The last attack that Ukraine conducted on a Russian city, about 5 or 6 of the flamingos allegedly got shot down, and we didn't see any impacts from that missile attack. So it must be true that Russia did shoot them down. So actually, this is needed. Actually, like the ability for this to like evade the air defenses, it's actually direly needed, I would say. Also, by the way, this is going to throw Russia off badly because if they thought they were making any headway with starting to shoot these things down using their really crappy S-400s, they're not going to have an easy time shooting it down now because with it flying this low, I mean, they're not going to be able to get a lock on that.
Well, the thing about that prior report is, because I think we covered it a couple of days ago, actually we did, is that the shoot down videos and evidence that they had were at an extremely high altitude of over 1,000 feet for the flamingos that they claim were shot down, and also the explosive profile in the aftermath doesn't really show a flamingo being shot down. It looks like it may have been some form of an FP1 or an FP2 getting shot down, and so I would say that the Russian claims of them shooting down 6 flamingos are probably a little bit outlandish or generally unverified because there's no proof that these were flamingos, and due to their flight altitude, it would be highly unlikely because we've never seen flamingos flying that high above the ground for an S-400 to be able to detect them and shoot them down. They generally fly at about 150 to 250 feet above ground level, and these interceptions are way above that. So I think the Russian claim that they shot down 6 of these is probably completely unverified, and we also have never seen any aftermath video from the Rostov area showing any debris fields of FP5 flamingos as well. So they probably have shot down a few of them, but 5 to 6 of them over the Rostov area would generally be very difficult, especially with the video and picture evidence that we saw. It'd be very hard to be able to confirm that those were flamingos because nothing about their flight characteristics were similar. But still, while these flamingos are conducting their flights and are apparently getting more software upgrades in the meantime, there's another Ukrainian threat that is emerging throughout this day that is starting to cause some tremendous trembles and concerns inside of Russia, it seems, and also it's causing quite some fascination, at least on our end here on the channel, as we saw that today the Wildberries distribution facility in Saratov was hit, and we understand that it was a refinery that was hit and heavily damaged as a result of this attack today, of which we could see the aftermath and fire right here in this clip. But this fire and this attack was conducted by a drone of which we have never seen before. And I want to show you one more clip here to show you the damage to the oil refinery, and also this shows a traditional FP1 long-range drone attack system hitting the refinery, if I can find out my wordage here. Hitting the refinery, but we're about to show you another one that hit the refinery that was less filmed and only briefly seen. From what we were able to note, a new drone has been seen over the skies of Ukraine, and before I actually show you all the system itself, this was the small clip, and it looks to be the only one, showing the drone flying on in towards the Saratov refinery and hitting it directly. So here's the clip. And there it went.
Oh, That thing is moving at some speed right there. Also, that shape, like that delta wing shape, almost looks like an F-117 stealth drone that the U.S. manufactures a fighter aircraft, or what was that thing technically called? Was it a fighter aircraft,
It
or
was a
what was it?
bomber.
A bomber? A bomber? Yeah, there's people that call it an assault aircraft or something. I've heard that before, but it looks like that almost. It has that delta wing shape to it, and also that thing is moving extremely quick.
I mean, this thing is moving certainly at several hundred miles per hour. Let's watch this again, folks, because this video is in real-time speed. So over 4 seconds, it entered frame and left frame. So let's watch it again and look at the speed at which this thing is moving and also its design. This thing is moving. What, weirdly enough, did you hear that? It almost sounded like it was propeller driven.
Yeah, I bet it has to be jet powered though. Like, there's no way a propeller would move that quickly. It's just impossible.
Honestly, I would agree with you as well. But it is odd, though, that the clip makes it sound. I mean, listen to this. That thing sounds like a motorcycle almost.
Yeah, it almost sounds like a crate motor. Like a V8 crate motor they put in like muscle cars. It almost sounds like that. It almost sounds like it's added in after the fact because that really doesn't really match up with the drone. Really, that sound doesn't really add up.
It doesn't at all. Like this whole thing, it's quite a mystery. I mean, even the shape of the drone, it's something that is completely foreign to the battlefield so far. We have never seen a drone of this profile or design ever being used by the Ukrainian armed forces, and also the speed is something to note incredibly, and also the range that this thing has flown as well. This thing was seen in the Saratov region heading towards the Saratov refinery. If that thing flew in a straight line without any adjustments to its flight path from Ukraine, it had to fly a minimum of 470 miles into Russia, and we're assuming that it was traveling at that speed the entire time. So this is a tremendous rate of speed, and also a considerable distance to be seen for this one drone that we have never seen before. And it appears that this drone appears to be some sort of a new system, possibly a turbojet drone called the Bravo. This is actually what it apparently looks like when we're not watching it fly overhead at like 400 miles an hour. And it has one turbojet engine, a fairly large triangular design, a lot like it's kind of an F-117, and it also has the two vertical stabilizers in the rear with a dihedral that also quite closely resemble an F-117. It's just that this F-117 has been stung by a bee, and instead of having incredibly angular edges, it's more rounded. Here's the F-117, for example. That's the Bravo drone, as it's being called right now. This thing is able to carry, apparently, at least according to the reports that came out from Drone Bomber today, a warhead of up to 100 to 200 kilograms. So this thing actually carries a several hundred-pound warhead at the maximum. It has a range of up to 2,000 kilometers, which I believe is about roughly 1.5 thousand miles to 1.6 thousand miles, and it has a speed that can get up to 700 kilometers an hour. And if I was to type
Dang,
in,
that's about 435 miles an hour actually. So that thing is flying extremely quickly. I mean, to be able to shoot that down with a machine gun or like some Ivan standing on the road trying to like take pot shots at it, that's gonna be nearly impossible to speed like that.
I mean, honestly, also another thing that's to note, we do not really know much about this drone rather than this small preliminary report, as it appears that this drone largely was kept under wraps up until today, and not really a lot was known in the public about this drone, and this is the rough stats and estimates that are being given right now. So this thing, folks, can travel at a speed of about 440 miles per hour over a range of about 1,500 to 1,600 miles, meaning that it'd be able to cover that distance in about 3 hours, and it's able to carry a warhead that is up to 200 kilograms. And if I do the exact conversion for that to give y'all the pound weight of that, that's about a 450-pound bomb that this thing is carrying at a speed of
Damn.
430 miles per hour over 1,600 miles approximately.
Yeah, and also, I'm looking at an article right here about this drone. It came out on June the 23rd of this year. That's when the article came out announcing the drone's existence. And they said in the article that the drone was ready for testing, and the team planned a large-scale production batch of about 100 by the end of the year. So this might be the first combat test they've ever conducted, like on a live battlefield scenario. This might be the first one that they were seeing right here. But I see a lot of people in the chat, though, they're saying it doesn't look identical to the same drone that we saw in the video. It looks similar. I mean, it looks like it's the Delta Wing, and also we could barely see what was happening in that video. I mean, that thing was moving so quick, and the camera quality wasn't great. It's kind of hard to tell if it is an identical match.
I would say it kind of doesn't look
The
like it.
tail, The tail is a little bit different. It looks like it has a vertical stabilizer on the one in the video. This one really doesn't.
It could be that this was like some sort of an artistic render of the system, and in some sort of testing that they conducted that wasn't disclosed to the public, they found out that the two vertical stabilizers with a significant dihedral were probably not optimal for this sort of a system, so then they changed it to a more traditional control surface at the back to allow for more stability, possibly. That could be what we're seeing, so it could be some sort of a last minute modification for the actual test platform and to also try and make it easier to produce, because producing dihedrals like these on most aircraft where you have two vertical stabilizers and they're at a significant angle to the sides. From what I've heard, as far as manufacturing is concerned, it's fairly difficult and somewhat more expensive to be able to implement that, especially at higher speeds. And that can also lead, if there isn't a lot of computer input in keeping the airframe stable, to some instability issues. If I remember correctly from what they said about the F-22 and the F-117, they actually require for there to be software inside of both of those aircraft to conduct endless amounts of inputs, usually in the thousands per minute, to be able to try and keep the airframe stable because of their dihedrals. So it might be that they found that out and they said it's going to be a lot more expensive to make advanced software to keep this thing in the air with a vertical stabilizer layout like that. So they went with a traditional one instead because it's more proven.
Yeah, that could be it as well. Also, I see a lot of people saying, is that drone actually stealth? There's no evidence that this drone is stealth. And also, by the way, it's really not necessary to design like stealth into it, like, for example, with coatings and things like that. And also, geometric shapes. It's really not necessary because these drones are supposed to fly extremely low, below radar. So, mainly, they don't have to worry about like designing stealth. And also, by the way, from an economic standpoint, putting expensive coatings and stuff like that on a disposable attack drone, that's a one way. It's a drone that it does not intend to return. That would be very economically not efficient whatsoever. So it's probably just flying low. That's its main mode of stealth.
Also, I've seen a lot of people bringing up the most important point, costs per unit. And I don't know if we have any cost per unit estimate on this thing right now because I wasn't able to find one earlier today. And Matthew, or have you been able to find one throughout the day that might give us a rough approximate on how much this unit costs?
So let me check here real quick. Let's see if I can get that number real quick. Sadly, there's so little information about this drone right here. I really can't get you one. Yeah, it does not look like they put a number out on it. And once again, they may not even have a number yet because they're simply testing it right now from the looks of it. If that is the same drone that has a modification to it, they're simply testing it. So they don't have a mass production number yet, it doesn't look like.
I would also have to say, folks, I don't really think that the airfoil, well, not really the airfoil, but the airframe or the fuselage was designed with any concept of stealth behind it. I think that the design of this craft is actually intended to produce higher rates of speed because there's less elements of drag on it due to its triangular shaped body and also the fact that it honestly, folks, if you look at it, it's basically just shaped like a large arrowhead. It's probably the best way to describe this thing. It has a bit of a fatter body to it when you look at it up close here in this render, which is the closest example we actually have of this thing to look at. It has a fairly fat body, but it is shaped basically like an arrowhead on the front of an arrow. And arrows are, of course, quite dynamic. That design was picked because, one, it can pierce armor quite well, or pierce human flesh back in the day, and also on top of that, it is quite aerodynamic. So I think that really the design doesn't have anything to do even with being low visibility. It might be an unintended side effect. It might be low visibility. We don't know. But I think it's more so about trying to eke out that extremely high speed. Because right now, most FP1 drones, which the Ukrainians use as their mainstay drone attack force, travel about at a speed of 70 to 100 miles an hour, which is painstakingly slow. Those drones, to make it over the Urals, have to be in the air and flying for approximately 10 to 11 hours to make it to the Ural Mountains if they want to strike anything in Tyumen, Yekaterinburg, Chelyabinsk, or Omsk. This drone, flying at 430 miles an hour, is able to do that same distance, but they're able to do it in 3 hours, meaning that the drones are in the air for a lot shorter amount of a time, and that also allows for the Russians to have less of an alert in these areas to even try and get the non-existent air defenses they have up and running, because instead of there being 10 to 11 hours to try and notify the air defenses, there might only be 2 by the time this thing is detected. So outside of that, a lot of people are talking about the fact that this new drone has been seen, this new high-speed, high payload, long range drone, of which has never been seen before until today. And a lot of people are wondering what is going to be happening now that the Ukrainians are rolling out what can only be described as advanced drone platforms and advanced drone designs. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so I'm sure this has the Russians panicking. I'm sure it does because they were already having a hard enough time shooting down the slower FP1 drones, the normal fixed wing propeller driven drones. They were already struggling with that. And now they have an added complication now. Now they have drones flying in that look way more advanced. They're flying at almost 450 miles an hour, roughly around that mark. And these things are flying extremely low. So that's a bad combo. Speed and low altitude, that is the bane of the Russian air defense force's existence. And that's exactly what this new drone appears to have. So, mainly the Russians are using a whole bunch of like Russian soldiers with machine guns to act as air defense around oil refineries and other places like that. And they have no hope in hell of shooting down these really fast turbojets. They have no chance in hell of doing that. And I mean, their only alternative is to use very expensive missile-based interceptors like the S-400. But the problem with that is these things are flying so low and so fast that it becomes very difficult to get a target lock on it. So what Ukraine's doing here is exploiting a very big loophole in the Russian air defense, which is not too hard to do, honestly, these days. But this is making it even more complicated. So I would say, with the poll here, I would say that I think that Russia will take some more hits. It looks like 74% of the people said that, while 13% of the audience said it'll only cause a temporary advantage, and 9% said nothing will really change. And I'll say, definitely with the 74%, I think Russia's in for some pretty serious hits. And also with a 2,000 kilometer range on this thing, I mean, that can go really, really deep into Russian territory as well. So this could be as deadly as the Flamingo missile upgrades that we've recently seen as well as of today. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I think that the Russians are going to be taking a great deal more hits because this thing seems to be, it seems to almost be a cruise missile of a sort. Although it is basically just an evolved version of the FP1, it's almost getting into the territory of a Flamingo. It's only a little bit slower than the Flamingo by about 150 miles per hour or so. It has about the same range, and its warhead is 4 times smaller. This might allow for this drone to be produced and fielded a lot cheaper and in far larger numbers than the Flamingo, producing only a quarter of the damage, but they might be able to field 4 times the number of these than a Flamingo cruise missile, meaning this allows for them to conduct strikes basically with 500-pound bombs on targets 1,500 and 1,600 miles into Russia while keeping the price tag affordable and also making these widely fieldable. This means that they're going to be trying to open up the ground for future attacks that are far more destructive than the attacks we've seen so far with the older, tried and true FP1 platform, and maybe allowing for a larger number of strikes than the much more expensive but incredibly effective FP5 Flamingo, which we've only seen used in a limited handful of instances in attacks against the Russian Federation. So I would have to say that they're definitely going to be taking a lot more hits. Ukraine is leaning very heavily into drones being basically their savior on the field, and their savior in the grander strategic sense, and it doesn't appear to be a belief that is false or poorly founded. It seems that the Ukrainians have truly turned the war around in every way with drones, and this is just the next step in that evolution.
It's really interesting too. With drone warfare, it's not really about coming up with countermeasures because countermeasures are extremely difficult to come up with because air defense systems take a long time to produce. They're very complex and also expensive to produce as well. So neither Ukraine nor Russia can really afford that. They just simply can't. It takes too much time and money to really come up with new systems like that. So the only way to combat drone warfare is to keep escalating. Each side must keep innovating. And basically, whoever can innovate the fastest, that's who's going to win the war, basically. It's not about countermeasures more so. It's more about making sure your drones are more potent and more lethal as time goes on. And if one side starts falling behind on production or development, like Russia, they start getting hit and they start taking hits they really can't afford to take at that point. So, I mean, I would say drone warfare is really, really dangerous, I would say, because, I mean, if you can come up with, for example, like a way to shoot the drones down, which I would say it's nearly impossible with a drone like this to shoot it down effectively on a consistent basis, then all you have left is escalation.
Really, honestly, that is true. And also, I'd have to say this: at this point, the Ukrainians have basically entered what I would generally describe, folks, as the technological jumps and leaps that were seen in the First World War and the Second World War. Because at this point, Ukrainian drone technology is evolving as quickly as technology that we saw in any other country during the Second World War or the First World War. During the during the Second World War, to give you all a really good example of this, Germany entered the war with tanks that looked like this, and I'll show you this here really quickly. This is a Panzer II, and that was one of the mainstay tanks that Germany had at the beginning of the Second World War. By the end of the war, the Germans were fielding tanks that looked a lot more like this instead, which many of y'all will know as the Tiger II. And so the technological leaps and jumps in terms of the main caliber of the guns, the armor that was fielded, and also even just the sheer tonnage of the vehicles and their mechanical complexity had skyrocketed from what was seen at the very first days of the Second World War. We've seen that the Ukrainians have moved in about 4.5 years, so about the same period as the Second World War was fought in, from no drones at all, and if they had drones, they were extremely crude. They were quite literally just DJI Mavics with custom-designed cradles that could drop small bomblets from several hundred feet up or 100 feet up onto Russians below. We've seen them go from that to now they are producing drones that have almost cruise missile-like capabilities in range, payload, and speed, and are able to strike 1,500 miles into the Russian Federation. If anything, the Ukrainians might be coming up with a cheaper alternative and a far more fieldable alternative than the cruise missile that may cost pennies to the dollar of what conventional designs have cost up until now, even compared to the FP5 Flamingo, which is about the cheapest and easily fielded cruise missile we see anywhere in the world currently. So moving us on out of that bit of news from the area of Saratov, we also are able to see that further north up the Volga River and inside the city of Samara, and specifically the suburb of Novosimikino, there appears to have been some major strikes that were also conducted within this area today. And not to show you all that clip again, that's actually a duplicate clip. We will be moving into Novosimikino and showing you all the strikes that were conducted on the wildberries and the major fire that's ensued afterwards. Here's a clip showing you all the fire in the town.
Oh. A fire in the town or a fire on the town?
Both. Like it's a,
I think the fire is the town.
well, you know what, Matthew? I gotta wonder, is it an improvement to the local area, or is it not? Also, by the way, I think this is the Wildberries facility right here. It looks like it was still under construction. Oh, dang, this thing was new. Dude, they literally just got done building this. It's not even on the map, like, as a Wildberries facility yet.
Oh man, that's a bad ROI. I think that's 0%.
I think that's pretty bad. Like, I think I'd agree with you. I think that is pretty bad. Damn, you can't even go in. Man, this town must be brutal, man. Like, you can't even go in there. There's one little spot right here. Jesus!
Oh yes,
Oh
this
my
is what we
God!
love. This is the Russia that we all know and hate.
Oh my God! They don't even pave the street here. It's literally just dirt and rocks. Oh my God! So apparently, we're guessing that this is the Wildberries facility right here. That still looks like it was under construction at the time. And it was near to this absolutely horrific town. I'll be honest with you, folks. I think if the fire spread into the town, hopefully everyone will evacuate. But if it burns down the structures, I think it would only be doing an improvement to the locality, not any sort of harm or damage with how bad that looked. I mean, my God, that was pretty damn bad. But outside of that, we also have been able to see the facility burning in the second clip right here, and also the fact that the fire brigade have finally shown up and started to try and fight the blaze.
Yeah, I don't think there's any fight in that blaze right there. Might as well just go ahead and sort of give in and accept it.
I think the firefighters showed up a little too late and the blaze basically won, because it doesn't look like there's anything left of the building by then.
The firefighters arrived and were overwhelmed by the smokes, carcinogens and tonnage.
Man, they were overwhelmed by that upper left hook from that fire. I tell you, it's something. But if they keep pouring water on that one office at the front, they might be able to put out at least that one area. Moving us on from that clip and into the next one, we also were able to see more footage of the strike around the Samara area from Samara itself, a couple of miles down south.
Is that somebody running a radar detector in the background? It sounds like a radar detector.
I think it's just, the Russians doing their thing. It's probably the state trying to get in on state secrets or something, like they're hearing these people go, "Oh my God, that's terrible." And in the background you hear the FSB microphone turning on, beep, beep, beep. Wait, what did they say? Man, it's like that might be it. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, in Russia, you don't need to buy a radar detector. You simply give the money to the police to look the other way. I mean, it's a lot cheaper that way, from what I've heard at least. So, I mean, to buy a radar detector is a waste of the money.
Man, honestly, man, it really is.
На Гарри почему нет, да? Вот.
In this next clip, we also were able to see the fire once more. And we also got a picture of the fire, showing us the scale of it, and then this one as well. Looks like the eruption of Mount St. Helens, honestly. I mean, these fires are brutal, and the infernos continue to rake through and destroy largely all of the large-scale wild berries facilities throughout the country. Not only are these fires burning in Saratov and Samara, but someone filmed an aftermath clip after the fire has subsided in the Volgograd wild berries, and the Volgograd wild berries is also ceased to exist from the damage. We see him just driving by here, and the entire facility is quite literally burned to the ground. It's unbelievable the damage that's being caused to these facilities. And we also were able to see that in the Ufa area, last night, drones hit the Ufa refinery a second time, which has continued the fire, and this one picture came out confirming that the fire continues to blaze on the area of the Ufa oil refinery, once again showing that the largest oil refining facility within Balochistan is continuing to burn to the ground. The Ukrainians are not really giving any reprieve whatsoever at this point to most strategic targets within the country. If anything, they're making sure to hit them and keep the fires going for as long as possible in each attack wave, even conducting double strikes on targets that look to see that their fires are going out a little bit earlier than anticipated. While all of this was going on in the major strikes inside of Russia, we also were able to see that there was a major strike that happened today from Ukrainian drone forces within the area of Dzhankoy, or at least on the E105 highway heading down towards Simferopol. We were able to hear a report earlier on that the Ukrainians had conducted an absolute day of reckoning, a judgment day against Russian fuel trucks that had somehow made it into the Crimean Peninsula. As many of you all will know, the E14 highway, which serves as Russia's only land transit corridor to Crimea and Kherson, has been heavily strained due to major Ukrainian attacks being conducted on the near daily, destroying a large amount of Russian supply trucks and semi-trucks that are traveling down the highway either from Crimea or to Crimea and Kherson. This has created a situation where most Russian supplies did not make it to their intended distribution points, whether they be the Russian frontline forces in Kherson or the remaining support forces that are left inside of Crimea. Somehow, some way, this convoy had made it all the way down the E14 highway, and it made it to the Chanhar Gap and crossed the pontoon bridge that currently sits about right here between the old bridge and the new bridge. The new bridge has been knocked out, and the old bridge is structurally unstable to where it cannot really be used. So this convoy made it across the pontoon bridge at Chanhar, drove on down towards Dzhankoy, and then tried to press on to Simferopol to deliver the fuel. This one clip here will give you all a glimpse of what the aftermath of the convoy's fate looks like, but we'll show you all the Ukrainian POV of their attack on this convoy here in just a moment. But here's a brief video showing the real aftermath on the ground of the drone attack.
Oh, wow. It's like a hellscape.
It really does. And right here, you can actually see one of the fuel trucks flipped over and still burning. The attack was that recent.
Huh, I mean, I'm not sure about y'all, but I mean, I don't see anything personally. I mean, I don't see anything.
Man, hang on, man. Let me be like that woman in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You know, the Ukrainians are so weak and stupid. The people. Hang on, I'm getting a phone call. Oh, you do not want me to tell them about how weak and stupid and feeble the Ukrainians are? Okay, Mr. Sir.
Oh.
Thank you. Click.
As you can clearly see here, the fuel is getting to its final destination with no issues. It's just simply panicking. They're saying it's a bit of a little disaster, Bliat.
Man, you know the Russians need to start doing that whenever anyone in Russia goes, I'm literally in a 5-mile line for gas. Look, don't be a panicking. Putin has everything under control. Like, it's like, do that trick.
This was clearly right here, just a pebble in the road that caused this thing to flip over. Stop panicking.
So now, folks, it's time for me to bring y'all from that brief glimpse of the aftermath into the actual judgment day that happened on this convoy. This is the very same convoy on the very same highway of which I just showed y'all the remnants of one of the trucks and what had happened to them. So I think y'all can get a pretty good idea of what's about to follow in this clip. Notice that this convoy is being protected by the Russian mobile fire groups. We have one vehicle at the front, the back, and the center, each one armed with some sort of a mounted machine gun post that in theory is supposed to stop these Ukrainian drones from being able to attack, hit, and destroy these fuel trucks. It didn't really pan out that way. But here's the clip. We'll have to mute the music, but
Oh.
we can already...
Oh.
Oh!
Oh. Oh, man. And they have protection, too, and it's not doing them any good. And we're wondering if the Russians are going to be able to shoot down jet drones going at almost 500 miles an hour. It's like, hell no.
Hell no. Like, absolutely not. And when you see the entire convoy on the move here, we can now see the Ukrainian POV from their attack drone that's now in the area and flying right down on top of the convoy. We can actually see the rear mobile fire group vehicle right there and the third fuel truck in the convoy right in front of it. And it appears that this drone is trying to come in and target the mobile fire group vehicle? The fuel truck, actually. Oh my god, dude, it flew right over him!
Oh my god. Man, and also, by the way, it's like, you know, those fuel trucks, if they're filled to the brim, which I'd assume that they probably are, I mean, as you can see, those things are literally road scale bombs right there going down the road. So I don't know if it damages the mobile fire group behind them, or do they come out unscathed?
I think we're actually about to get an answer to that here in a minute, but we can see the fuel tank explode, and it looks like the mobile fire group truck just drove right into the inferno. We've now lost the mobile fire group vehicle. I don't see it anywhere. I just see the fuel truck spilling out fuel onto the road, which is burning as it exits the vehicle. And we can now see the entire fuel slick catching on fire along the, oh my god, along the entire road. Oh, the mobile fire group vehicle is gone. There's the mobile fire
Bro,
group
it did
vehicle.
a vanishing act. It's literally just disappeared right there. Bro, that is insane. The entire road is now full of black smoke. I mean, what are they paying these drivers to? Are these military drivers driving these fuel trucks, or are they civilian drivers that just got like lured into doing something stupid?
Civilians.
Jeez, man. I don't know how the hell what they're paying these people, but they got to be paying them pretty good to do something this stupid.
I have a feeling they're probably not. Like, if we're being honest, they're probably not, man. Russia's not about fairness. But that's the mobile fire group vehicle right there. It actually looks to have overturned and exploded, or something along those lines right there, it seems. And it looks like they're zooming in, and we can see the charred landscape around it. And yep, the mobile fire group vehicle actually drove into the inferno and appears to have flipped over. I'm assuming that the driver may have been overwhelmed by the flames or the heat, and so he lost control of the vehicle, and it then careened off the road and somehow flipped onto its side. So we're most likely assuming that the gunner and the driver were killed in this mobile fire group, and support personnel that were on the vehicle may have been wounded or killed as well.
Wow, that honestly, this is like one of the biggest like single acts of carnage I've seen of like a entire convoy getting taken out. I mean, of course, we see from time to time we'll see like a fuel truck hit there, here, and yonder, but this is literally an entire convoy getting systematically destroyed one by one. And I don't think any of them made it to the destination.
No, I don't think so. We can actually see that the remainder of the group is still pressing on, and it looks like they're running off of the convoy rules, that if it looks like there's some sort of an ambush going on, do not stop, just try and like push right through to the other side. But that doesn't really work in a drone warfare world. So now the convoy is down to 2 fuel trucks, and the middle protection vehicle is now taking up the rear position, and there's still the protection vehicle at the front in the mobile fire group units. So that is now what the convoy looks like after the third truck had been hit. And it now looks like they're going for a second vehicle.
And as you can see, the drivers clearly know what they're doing here. You want to get the fuel trucks as close together as possible, so that way a secondary explosion might take out the other fuel truck. Like, that's always smart.
It is always smart, genius even. And it looks like they're now going for the one that is second to the rear. And now they're hitting the second one. So we can see this one going up. It actually looks to have veered hard left, but yet the drone still hit, and now it looks like the truck's lost control, just rolling off the highway, and it's now
the driver
flipped
jumped
over.
out. I think the driver jumped out right before it careened off the road. I saw something hanging off the side of the truck there. Is that a driver or is that something else?
Let's take a look.
Let's see here.
I don't really see that.
Is that a driver or is that smoke? I can't tell which one it is.
It looks like smoke to me. I didn't see anyone hopping out.
Interesting. Yeah, also, he'd be a magician to have to, like, crawl over to the passenger seat, open the door, and somehow dangle out the side of the passenger door. I mean, he'd have to be a magician. He was apparently still steering the truck, too, so maybe that was just a smoke.
Yeah, I think it was the smoke. But that vehicle then went off the road. We can see the fires have already started all around. And this is actually, you know what, Matty? This is actually the truck that was filmed by that guy on the ground. It's actually the fuel truck that flipped over right near to the guardrail and right next to this tree. So that is actually the very fuel truck that we saw the ground view from the aftermath when it was still burning about an hour or two later.
It's quite severe to say the least. And, this is like just some of the fuel that they were able to scrounge together to try to send to Crimea. And, it's got to hurt to see all that going up. I'm not sure what the capacity of those fuel trucks is. But I mean, in Russia's case, where they're running low on fuel as a whole, that's very valuable fuel, whatever amount that was.
It really is. And you know what's even crazier is that out of these 3 trucks, only one of them made it into the deeper part of Crimea to drop off their fuel. So if we were to use this convoy as a standard sample of how many fuel trucks are being targeted and destroyed along the M14 and into Crimea, we would be able to get the number that out of the 100% capacity of fuel that the Russians have a limited capability even of bringing into Crimea, only about 33% of it actually makes it to a distribution point like a gas station or a fuel storage facility inside of Crimea. Meaning that right now the number, or generally the tonnage of fuel that's making it into Crimea is exceedingly low, and even if Russia was able to operate at full capacity importing fuel into Crimea, it still would not meet the demands and the requirements of the armed forces within that area or the civilian populace of the Crimean Peninsula, meaning that they are seeing that hardly a drop of fuel is making it into Crimea because of these sorts of convoy attacks that Ukrainian medium-range drone forces are conducting with great degrees of success, like we just saw. So moving us on out of that, a lot of people have also been seeing that there were other major attacks inside of Crimea, and we were able to hear that an airfield within the area of Sevastopol, the Khersones airfield in Sevastopol, apparently was struck overnight. We were able to get satellite proof of the damage to the rooftops of this facility. We also were able to hear that there was an explosion in Simferopol, and we also got another clip showing that Feodosia City had come under attack last night, and air defenses were seen attempting to shoot down whatever was incoming on the city. We actually hear one of the drones. Over in the oil-loading port of Taman, it also appears that the fire that has continued to be seen is still burning at the Taman oil-loading port.
It's quite bad, actually. That's not good. You don't want to see that in your neighborhood.
No, not at all. No, heavens no. This is the biggest oil loading port Russia has in the whole Black Sea. Novorossiysk, I think, is second, and Sochi is third, but that is the most important one that they have, and it's still burning from the attack scene, I believe 2 days ago or 3 days ago at this point. It's quite a while ago.
Hey, excuse me. It's they had it. Not they don't have it anymore. It's gone.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. It's currently out of stock, and you will be able to get it based on availability. That's what we
Oh,
are
yes.
saying.
Be back soon. Out for lunch.
Man, they feasting. But first we feast. But anyways, moving us on out of the Taman oil loading port, it is now time for us to get on into Moscow, because with all of this grim news that's coming out from Russia, a lot of people are seeing that the Russians are quite truly at the losing side of the war. Really, where in the world could it be seen that the Russians are winning? And there really is quite literally nowhere. And so a lot of people are wondering, would Putin stop the war? And a lot like what we've been saying here on the channel for a long time, it appears that he doesn't really have the option, as some people, or some U.S. officials have stated, that they believe that Putin has to continue the war in Ukraine to hold power, as defeat would spell the end of his leadership of the country. Which is largely exactly what we've been saying for a very long time here on the channel, but U.S. officials are now publicly stating this belief as well, that if Putin loses the war, it's the end of his government. And that's also the reason why we've been saying here on the channel that instead of just peacefully losing the war, if there's a way to do that, Putin would rather take a chance at some sort of a desperate escalation to be able to try and see that maybe some concessions that would be given to turn the situation around, and he might be more willing to go to war with NATO, because either way, if he ends up dying in an overthrow of the government because they put him on trial and execute him because of the war in Ukraine, or he dies in the hands of NATO armed forces in a larger conflict like a Third World War, really, as far as he's concerned, what's the difference? And so a lot of people are wondering about that in the chat right now, and actually talking about that and voicing their opinions on it. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the new analysis is actually generally what we've been saying for a while, actually. The analysts are now publicly predicting that Putin must keep the Ukraine war going, or he would certainly be ousted by the Russian people, or maybe even the military, possibly. So, what are your thoughts? 54% of the audience said, I agree with that assessment. Putin must keep it going, or he will be ousted, while 31% said, I disagree, and Putin can end the war, and 10% said, I'm 50-50 on this one. And I would have to say that I definitely agree with that assessment. In fact, that's the assessment that we've been giving as well, generally, over the last several months. There's a couple different reasons for it. Number one, there's a structural reason. Russia is almost wholly a war economy. They're spending more money than ever of the national budget on the war in Ukraine, and now their entire economy is being kept afloat by the war going on inside of Ukraine. So if they suddenly stopped it, they're going to have a much worse financial disaster that comes crashing down on their heads if they suddenly stop it. So, and that's the nature of stopping the war. It's not going to stop, over like time, gradually. It's going to be a sudden stop if it comes to an end. They'll either sign an agreement to end the war, or something else happens, but possibly in the meantime. So that's one problem. Number two, let's say Putin agrees to end the war by treaty. That's going to cause the people around him, especially the military generals, to say, wait a minute, like this guy drug us through 4+ years of war, and we came out of it by signing an agreement with the enemy that Putin's called, alleged Nazis inside of Ukraine and stuff like that. And they're going to start looking at him and thinking this guy's weak, and they're going to try to overthrow him. So I think Putin knows that. And also that explains why we see occasionally purging that takes place inside the Russian government. Putin knows that these people around him are a threat, and he knows if he goes too far with it, like, for example, ending the war with no results to show for it, that's going to be the end of his regime. So I'm with the 54%. As long as Putin's in charge, he will keep this war going until he either loses the war completely, he's ousted, or something else happens in the meantime. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to be with the 54% as well. Putin has to keep going, and that's largely in line with our analysis that's been here on the channel for years at this point, that he will have to keep the war going. If anything, he might have to escalate. As Devin Gray throws in a $500 donation, and we just hit the goal! Hey!
Whoa! Let's
whoa,
go!
Jack!
Igor! Man, I tell you
Turn
what, we
up.
smashed the goal. We even got a little air horn in there too, a little air horn. You gotta love that. But man, that is crazy, by the way. Also, Devin Gray's doing a 500. We're now about $400 above the goal right now, which is tremendous to see. Literally, right at the hour mark, we hit that goal well above it. And a huge shout to the LSA for making that possible once again. That is another good goal right there, Matt.
And I gotta say, absolutely incredible stuff. And we've got to give a humongous shout out to all of the amazing folks in the Lee Spring Army, especially Devin, for their incredible support to this fundraiser and helping to raise over $2,350 in support of Nova Ukraine. It's incredibly needed at this moment with the Russians conducting their ballistic missile attacks on major cities. There's a significant number of Ukrainians who are now finding themselves displaced because their former homes have been destroyed in Russian attacks. And the support that Nova Ukraine provides to those people and helping them to find housing and also providing them shelter and basic necessities in the meantime, considering they may have lost everything, is extremely vital. And y'all are helping conduct a tremendous service in Ukraine for the Ukrainian citizenry, and are also helping the Ukrainian government to focus a lot more of their efforts on fighting and ending this war, so that way this suffering will only continue for not much longer instead of into the indefinite future. And so tremendous thanks to every single one of y'all once again for y'all's unbelievable support to the fundraiser so far tonight. And if y'all want to continue to support, y'all can. There's nothing stopping y'all. Please, by all means, if you would like to support, you can. Every bit of support goes entirely to Nova Ukraine, and it helps them out tremendously. But before we move on into the rest of our news, I do want to make sure to address the poll because I didn't give it its due justice yet. I would say I'm with the 54% because the Russian government is truly in a situation where they can end the war. If they end the war, they are in an absolute economic crisis. Putin has suffered a significant and major failure of his leadership, the largest that would be seen generally in the entire modern history of Russia, whether it be the Soviet Union or the Russian Federation, and he would not be able to stay around. There would be so many people who would be opportunists attempting to overthrow him in some form of a government coup, and also the public would most likely turn against him because all of the suffering and sacrifice and loss that they have sustained in every way would have been for nothing at that point. So generally, if anything, he's probably going to try and escalate it like we've been predicting here on the channel and possibly start a larger confrontation with NATO to try and see if he can turn the situation around. Also, to explain this really quickly, because this is something that a lot of people say, well, that doesn't make any sense. Why in the world would they do that when they don't really have a military to speak of or any fuel to work with? You know a country, folks, that did a very similar thing a while ago that had basically all of the same problems, and they didn't really know how to end the conflict, so they escalated it to try and end it another way. Matthew, would you like to take a guess at what country that was and what they did?
Is it about to be Iran and the U.S. situation?
No! It was Nazi Germany in 1941, because the Germans in 1941, folks, had actually ended up in a situation that they really weren't all too happy with. They had defeated the French, and they had largely taken over the majority of continental Europe, but the problem is that the British never gave up, and they were planning on the British giving up or surrendering at some point. Even a light surrender would have been accepted by the Germans, and that would have allowed them to stabilize the situation and start figuring out the economics. But because the British did not surrender, they actually had to continue the war at exorbitant cost to be able to try and bombard the British into submission, which cost them a great deal of money. And so, as they were trying to figure out the problems here, they were going, we're having to pay the Soviet Union a ton of money because we're basically having to import most everything from them, food and materials and whatnot. So what if we go to war with the Soviet Union because we don't like them anyway, and then we'll be able to take over their resources, exploit the people, generally exterminate most of them, and exploit any materials or goods that they produce. And that would be the theory. And thus, they began Operation Barbarossa at the latter part of 1941, and the invasion of the Soviet Union began, which was an absolutely detrimental mistake because they probably could have managed their cards well if they had found some way to negotiate some sort of a peace solution with the British. But instead, they went to war with the Soviet Union, and that was basically the beginning of the end. But really, if we're being honest, the beginning of the end had already started in North Africa by that point. Outside of that, though, that was basically the reason why they invaded the Soviet Union, is because they were trying to find a way to handle their financial situation by cutting out the money that they were having to pay the Soviets to import their raw materials and food. And so they thought, if we invade them and we knock them out and completely wipe out their country, we can just basically exploit the people, genocide everyone who's left there, and then take all of their raw resources for free, which didn't pan out at all. It's like that absolutely did not pan out. And that's why, folks, I say that the Germans in World War II are far overrated for what people think they were nowadays. Like, a lot of people think of them as like super soldiers with super weapons, and in reality, it was that kind of thinking, and it didn't make a lot of sense. Kind of like how Russia's thinking in the modern day wouldn't really make a lot of sense, but it's not going to stop them from doing it. Invading Ukraine didn't make a lot of sense back in 2022, yet they still did it. And based off of this line of thinking, it's not far out of the question to say they could try and escalate and go to war with NATO, even though the situation is definitely not in their favor at this point, to try and see if they can get some sort of a negotiated peace or a settlement where most of the sanctions and the restrictions against them are lifted, so that way it doesn't turn into a nuclear conflict. But I hope that does address that the best that I can, folks. And with that, it is time for us to move on out of the Eastern European region for a brief moment and on down into the Middle East. Because y'all thought the Middle East saga was taking a little bit of a breather. Oh no, we've got the interim period to cover now in between the second phase of the war and whatever's coming next. And it's already sizing up to be one hell of an interim period. I will tell you all that right now. So before we move on into that, though, I do want to make sure that we take a brief moment to shout out all of the top donors of the fundraiser so far tonight, and also get 3 questions from the chat. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so to give our top donors a shout out, so far we've had a 500 from Devin Gray, and that's so far the largest donation of the night to the fundraiser, and a huge shout out to Devin for that massive generosity. We also had a 200 from Charles Z07PC, also wildly generous as well as Andrew Barbara, who also put in a 200, along with James Hughes, who put in a 160, and Give Up Now, who put in a 155, and also Hal Rose, who put in a 100, along with Cerberus 3, and a 75 from Old Warrior Fella, as well as a 50 from Elwood, and also Unreliable Narrator Cat. Also a 50 from Alan Dinah Storm, Chef Danny B, Slim Jim, and SoCal Lion for all putting in the top donations of the night. So wildly generous donations tonight, I will say. And also a huge shout to everybody, like we always say, for putting in any amount of donation to the fundraiser tonight, because y'all have gotten us well past the goal at this point, over $400 past the $2,000 goal, which is tremendous to see once again, and going to a very good cause, which is Nova for Ukraine. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, tremendous thanks to everybody who has been supporting the fundraiser tonight, big donations and small, because each and every single one of y'all are having a significant impact on the situation in Ukraine. Right now, $2,394 has been raised for Nova Ukraine, and Nova Ukraine provides shelter, housing, basic necessities, and other things for Ukrainian citizens who have been displaced from their homes because of the war and have to find somewhere else to live. And that sort of help and support is incredibly beneficial and extremely helpful, because otherwise the situation would be very difficult for these people. And so y'all are doing incredible work for those folks over there through Nova Ukraine and the fundraising y'all have done tonight. And I got to give all of y'all a tremendous shout out once again for doing your part in the war effort. And so with that in mind, folks, it's now time for us to move on into 3 questions from the chat. So Matthew, what do we got here?
So our first question from the chat is going to go to none other than Jay Murr, who said, "Enforcers, what is your opinion on the difference between Russia and Ukraine on their choice of targets?" And I would say Russia has been targeting civilian targets and military targets literally since the war began. Russia's never really changed whatsoever in their targeting, and they've always done war crimes left and right. That's what we've always documented that here on the channel for a very long time. Russia's always done that. But I will say this about Ukraine: Ukraine still discriminates with their targets. They still are careful about what they're hitting, but they are moving on to more of a total war, like for example, hitting the Wildberries warehouses and things like that. I would argue that moves more toward a total war scenario than necessarily just simply hitting solely military targets, because there's always a fair argument to say that those are mainly civilian style targets, really. But of course, there's some people that allege they have military supplies in there and things like that, so it's up for debate. So that's what I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I almost say, holy, outside of that and getting to the question here. I would say that my opinion on the targeting differences between Russia and Ukraine is that generally the Russian Federation conducts indiscriminate civilian bombings while also targeting military infrastructure and forces, and the armed forces of Ukraine generally conduct military targets or critical infrastructure bombings, and sometimes they kind of straddle the boundary between military and civilian with the Wildberries facilities. If we're using the Ukrainian allegations as their baseline for why they're hitting them, it's generally kind of straddling the line between it being a civilian target or a military target, but kind of ekes out a little bit onto the military side, sort of. So I would generally say the armed forces of Ukraine are a lot more discriminating in their strikes. They make sure to largely remove civilian populations from being directly impacted or targeted by their strikes, while on the other hand, the Russian Federation will fling an Iskander into an apartment block just for the fact that it's going to kill innocent civilians, so that way they can try and conduct a reign of terror on Ukraine and try and force the Ukrainian government to end the conflict just because of the human suffering of their people. The Ukrainians really don't do that in turn to the Russians. They strike strategic targets and military sites, and so I would say if we're speaking for who has the upper hand morally in their strike campaign, and also which one's a lot more effective, the Ukrainians have the moral advantage over the Russians in their strike campaigns, and not only that, they also have the strategic advantage as well, because all of their munitions are being used on legitimate military targets. The effect is far more pronounced on Russia than the Russians' attacks against the Ukrainians. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, and a humongous thanks to you once again, Jamer, for an incredible question there. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to be a 500 Australian super chat from none other than Ross, all the way from down under. And also a huge, massive thanks to you, Ross, by the way, for that support. Even on a Sunday, a $500 Australian support. That is insane, by the way, and extremely generous. And we do appreciate that very, very much, Ross. And he said, like many in the LSA, I've barely recovered from yesterday's hesitation by the U.S. To see the war with Iran to a satisfactory military solution. And your ability to suck up developing news and keep the conversation reporting going strong is absolutely legendary, and thanks, gents, for delivering the real news and in your own inimitable fashion. And LSA. And also, by the way, thank you very much, Ross, for the kind words. I'm glad to hear so many people find the coverage, even after 4+ years, to still be very, very effective, I guess is the best way to say it. We try our best. We will admit that these days, with the Iran war situation becoming such a tennis match, like a back and forth, and also it's on, it's off, it's on, it's off, that's wearing us out a little bit, but we try to power through that, because once we get back to the Ukraine war coverage, that situation is generally moving forward for the most part instead of going backwards, so we kind of get a reprieve with that. But I will admit the Iran situation, that's driving us both crazy. Like, it's kind of burning us out to a certain degree with that whole thing. I can only imagine how the countries feel that are involved and tied up in that whole situation. They're probably feeling even worse. But Enforcer, what say you?
I have to agree. Good God. But also I have to thank you so much for those wildly kind words, Ross, and also the unbelievably massive support there. That is humongous. Honestly, that literally like blindsided me right there when you threw it in. Like Matthew was talking, I was going to go, God, I also have to do that in the middle of that because we never expect to get support on Sundays. It's always about the fundraisers. But I got to say, humongous thanks to you for that unbelievable support. And generally, the situation in the Middle East is extremely infuriating, aggravating, and also kind of, to be honest with y'all, it's a little bit depressing as far as I take it, because we always talk. I like, in speaking for myself here for a minute, instead of just saying we, because I'm talking about what I say and what I think specifically as an individual human being. I personally take the country as something that is an incredibly important thing to preserve, maintain, and always look for its positive improvement, me personally in my own mind. And I hold the country in incredibly high regard, and therefore I hold all of its decision making and all of its handling of normal affairs, whether they be ordinary or extraordinary, to be of high standards. It has to meet high standards, or it absolutely just gets me going. Like, it gets me going to the point that I'll just get enraged and be like, what the hell is wrong with all these people? And recently, the situation with Iran, with it going back and forth, and we're still where we were when we started the war in February, is extremely aggravating to me, because I generally expect that the civilian leadership in this country understands the position that they have had bestowed upon them by the privilege of the citizenry, not themselves, and that they would make sure to hold the citizenry and the nation in high regard, and to make sure to conduct our actions honorably and resolutely, to make sure that whatever results we get are the best for the country. And so far, I haven't really seen that yet in the Middle East. And to be completely frank, I really haven't seen that in any foreign policy actions over the past year and a half. So I've been very unhappy with it as of late, especially with the Middle Eastern situation. But we're always happy to know that everyone still enjoys the coverage, regardless whether we have good news or not. Really, to really cover out the Middle East, we still try and cover it as neutrally as we can. But also, I have to say, folks, that as much as we try and be neutral in almost every regard, we are humans, and I got to tell y'all, folks, I'm at my wits' end to patience watching the indecisiveness of this whole thing. It's a joke.
The good news is this is as close to being political as we will ever get with this Iran war situation. This is literally the worst it can get for, like, frustration levels. So this is as bad as we'll ever get, like getting close to that line of crossing the politics line. This is as close as it'll get. Thankfully, it can't get any worse than this. I say that, but if they do something that makes it worse than this, sooner or later, I might be eating my words on that. But I hope that we won't have a repeat of this again, because this whole, like, Iran war situation has been a challenge and a half not to get political on, because it's just so irritating. Like, it really irritates the hell out of both of us off the air that it's not going well, and also that bad decisions are being made. And also, I could actually tolerate a couple of bad decisions. Like, it happens. Like, nothing's ever perfect. The thing I can't tolerate is the indecisiveness and the inconsistency in the strategy. That's the part that's unbearable to me. Like, the fact that they don't even have a consistent strategy to even say that it worked or didn't work is the part that really just honestly pisses me off, really.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm just completely frank, folks, it's been getting more and more aggravating with each thing that's come around to pass. Because the first thing that was aggravating was the tariffs, which, if anyone knows basic economics, I'm sure many of y'all do, y'all know that trade is one of the largest wealth generators for any country in the world, and it's usually international trade. And so trying to limit international trade, which is an economically harmful action, and not only that, an economically harmful one to us and our allies, that was a little bit frustrating, but that was one that we could generally take in stride and just be like, this isn't really a good call, and just state it as neutrally as possible without getting emotionally invested in it. And then the next one, I would say this is the first one I ever got emotionally invested in, was we're going to invade and annex Greenland, and we'll go to odds with the whole of NATO to go and do that, and possibly split the whole NATO alliance to take one small island in the Arctic. And that was, I think, the first one where I was like, this is just making no sense at this point at all. I don't even know what the hell we're doing. And then they moved on from that, almost like ADHD. They moved on from Greenland and just dropped that overnight, and then moved on to bombing boats in the Caribbean that were transporting drugs allegedly, and then nabbed Maduro, which didn't really result in any changes at all as far as the situation in Venezuela is concerned. It let the oil companies in, but none of our other original stated goals were achieved whatsoever. And then right after we got done with that, we then moved on to the war with Iran, and now we're saying that we're going to invade Cuba. And it's just endless, like, indecisiveness, just hopping from thing to thing, and a lot of them don't really make any sense. Because I still haven't seen anyone really give a strong justification as to why Venezuela was something that had to be dealt with right now, and or why Cuba would have to be dealt with here in the immediate future. That's something that could come around in like a decade, and it would still be the same situation it is right now. And then with the Iran situation, which we said had to be dealt with and dealt with soon because our time was running out, we then see that they mishandle that completely on the strategic end from day one till now. So I would have to say it is quite aggravating, Chris. And also I know it's very aggravating for our allies, like all of y'all down there in Australia and everyone else around the world, because with the United United States being the leader of the sphere, a lot of y'all are directly impacted by our actions. So even if our actions are more focused on an American-centric level, it has a significant impact on our allies. And I also hold that in high regard as well, and want to try and mitigate any sort of damage or impact that allies feel because they're in our sphere of influence. But still, a humongous thanks to you for the incredible support and help with this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on and into the final question of the segment, and then we're going to be getting on into the rest of the news.
All right. So, also, by the way, if you're throwing in a super chat for the rest of this question segment here, we will grab those during the final question segment coming up after this next news segment. But our last live chat question here of this one is going to go to none other than Patty Mayo, actually. He said, can y'all talk a little bit about Lockheed's new EMP drone technology? And EMP drone technology, people talk about EMPs a lot these days. It's like a buzzword. Not to say it's not real, by the way, Patty Mayo, but I think the only way to create an EMP, like a strong electromagnetic pulse, which is what EMP stands for, I believe is by a nuclear explosion. That's one way that an EMP is created. I'm not sure if you can create one electronically. Like, can you create a pulse like that electronically strong enough to fry stuff?
So looking into it really quickly, it's not an electromagnetic pulse device. It appears to use microwaves to fry the circuit boards of other drones and basically burn them out of the sky, in a sense, as far as their electronics go. But I think this is the system that he's talking about, is the Morpheus.
Well, I mean, technically, that's an EMP like technology as well. I mean, a microwave is a electromagnetic pulse, so you could call it an EMP, I guess. But it's, well, I guess more specifically, it's microwave. But that is interesting, though. I mean, how do they get? That takes a lot of energy, though. Like, how do they like put a big enough battery on there to like send out a pulse of a large enough degree?
Let's see here. Let's read this here really quickly, because I'll be honest with you, I haven't heard of this drone before, Patty Mayo. This looks to be a very new one as well, only about 10 days old, or really 2 weeks old as far as the public knows. So let's read about it really quickly. Designed for field recovery and reuse, keeps a significantly low cost per kill, protecting defense budgets while maintaining relentless firepower. So a lot of corporate buzzwords. Let's see, it's accelerating prototype production of the Morpheus. The team is also planning intercepted. Let's see,
So you're saying that the AI overview is saying that it has an airborne high-power microwave. It's designed to neutralize more than 50 drones in a single flight by using those microwaves to fry the electronic circuits. Which we've seen the ground version of that before, by the way. There's a like a, I don't know if it's like a hemp, or it's like some like chassis they already have like on the ground, and they fitted like a large microwave emitter on the top of it, and they fired it at the sky at a herd of drones, and they took them all down in one go. But that's a huge system. I mean, that ground-based variant is a massive truck, a huge battery bank on it. I mean, it's a big deal. Like, you couldn't fit that to a drone for the most part. So I'm curious how they were able to shrink it down to fit on a drone that's sort of lightweight. It's like, how'd they go from that massive truck to, a small drone?
also, I would say I don't really get the premise behind it, because a lot of the Ukrainian drones use an explosive ordnance, to where they're basically like little air defense missiles, basically, that are human guided. This is kind of like a flying error denial system. It's almost like a drone version of electronic warfare aircraft, but a smaller scale. And the electronic warfare aircraft are generally used to scramble systems within a specific area for a brief period of time. I don't know why in the world they wouldn't just keep working on something like the Thor or any sort of a similar system like that, because those are ground-based, point-based defense systems, and you can really put those around any target of interest or on a front line and use them basically as conventional air defense systems, basically like a, what would be the best way to describe it, like an anti-aircraft gun in the general sense.
Yeah, and also, by the way, usually when drone attacks take place, I'm assuming these are taking down FPV drones for the most part, like the smaller quadcopters. I'm assuming that's what it's going for as the target. Those usually don't fly in like very concentrated swarms, at least according to what we've seen so far. They fly pretty dispersed, and they're usually one on one. Like the operator will send out one of them, it'll go hit a target, then the operator sends out another. Now maybe this device is more intended for AI like swarms, like for example, if Russia upgrades to start launching AI drone attacks where their swarms are more concentrated, maybe it could work in that setting. But I mean, for this to actually be effective, you have to have them all in one little area, very concentrated, to hit them with the microwaves.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it seems like an interesting system, and I think it does have a purpose. because the Ukrainians have stuff that's similar, but generally theirs actually works in the kinetic sense that they actually have to get close and almost make contact with an enemy drone, and then they explode onto it and destroy it. So it kind of is trying to work off of that principle, but I think it's kind of jumping ahead of the curve a little bit, because I feel like the United States should just produce the same things that the Ukrainians have, which are the Wild Hornets, and that's the drone that I'm speaking of, is the basically like the little surface-to-air missile that they've made out of a drone. That
They
would be
have
a
it.
lot cheaper and fieldable and a lot easier to get off of the ground. This is kind of going from like baby steps to basically trying to sprint and come up with like a super anti-drone weapon. I bet this thing is not cheap either.
Well, they already have the physical interceptors. Anduril makes the Anvil, which is a physical interceptor. It works very similar to what the Wild Hornet works like that Ukraine produces. I just don't know how much it costs compared to Ukraine's system. And also, I really haven't seen it fielded heavily. I'm not sure if maybe they've like signed an acquisition order for them or something. But the Anvil is basically the same thing if you pull it up.
Let's see here. Let me go pull up that. I think we looked into it before, the Anduril Anvil. Yeah, this thing was really expensive. Like, this thing was very expensive. I think it was like, what in the world was it? It was like $100-something thousand for this little cradle that only carries 2 drones. I think that was the cost that we saw last time. I'm not entirely sure. Let me pull up the Anduril Anvil cost. Let's see here. It costs, let me see if I can get a number for the single unit. Let's see here. $40,000 per unit.
If that's the price, then that's not on par with Ukraine. If that's
No.
actually the real price of it right there, is that coming from like their site or from like the AI overview?
That was coming from the AI overview, but they were given a
Okay.
$200 million contract as well for him. And I bet in that $200 million contract, it probably gets into the price per unit of the system. But if we were going off of 40 grand, let's just say for the sake of the conversation that it's 40 grand, that's $20,000 per interceptor drone. $20,000. That's the cost of a Shahed 136. And that's just for a small interceptor drone that could shoot down an FPV. I mean, that is getting very high up there in price, folks. The Ukrainians produce these things for, I think, a few $100s or less, usually per unit. And also, they're able to mass produce them. And that's kind of why I say the Lockheed Morpheus thing is really trying to jump the gun, because we don't have anything yet that's even close to the Ukrainian Wild Hornets that are mass produced, extremely cheap, and could be used in the thousands if need be per day. And we're already trying to jump from these sorts of systems into what would probably be the evolution of drone warfare in like the next 10 years or the next 5 years.
Or remember how long it takes them to develop stuff. It could take them that long to like develop it.
Oh,
I'm not
yeah.
sure if this thing fieldable already or is it just an idea?
Apparently, it's going through some sort of like prototype testing, according to the article that they wrote, and that they're trying to see if anyone would be interested in getting a contract for these. So it looks like it's in the early prototype stages.
Yeah, in that case, it's just a lot of stuff. The U.S. is very rigid, like with the way to develop stuff. It's not going to work when a war breaks out. So hopefully they'll realize that before the war. But I'm not sure if they will.
Yeah, I don't think they will. I hate to say this, folks, but I think our military is probably going to have to learn the lesson, unfortunately, the hard way, which I don't really like because we can just learn it easy from the Ukrainians, but apparently they don't want to, or the institution won't allow for it. So, anyways, I hope that does address the question well, though, Patty Mayo. At least the best we can, looking at it. That's the first time I ever heard of it, so take my opinion on it with a grain of salt. I haven't looked into it a great deal in the kind of tactics that they're planning on employing it with, and what kind of threat environment they're looking at to even create that thing. But it looks to me like it's an interesting system, probably going to be really expensive and maybe a little too ahead of its time for right now. But with that, it is time for us to move on out of that question segment and on into the rest of our news. And that actually moves us down, folks, and into the Middle East, because we have some news that's been coming out of the Middle East over the course of the day. Nothing really related to war. If you see anyone out there with a thumbnail today where it's like U.S. forces taught Iran a lesson, they're just BSing. There's literally no lessons being taught today. It was a fairly quiet day, but we are seeing a lot of interesting statements, though, by all sides, that is giving us an idea that the times where those kinds of titles might come back around and might actually be worthwhile is probably going to be very soon. As the U.S. has stated today that apparently they are actively talking to Iran. That was according to a statement from the president. He stated, "We were talking to them. It begins tomorrow afternoon. It would save a lot of lives." So we're back to the whole, the pen is mightier than the sword deal. We don't know how long this will last. And also the audio clips right here. We will not be playing that audio clip, but that is the written paraphrasing of the statement. We also were able to see that according to another statement made by the President of the United States, when the press asked the President about the situation on Iran, he stated, "I asked the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, what would you rather have us do?" And according to the President, he says that the Crown Prince stated, "We would prefer a deal rather than an attack," which is largely a diplomatic way of saying what we had already heard yesterday, which is that the Saudis apparently called us up and had a full-on crash out because we really didn't tell them what we were planning on doing, and we told them at the last minute, and they realized that the Iranians were probably going to start wiping away most of their power plants and desalination plants. So generally, that's how the president tells the story, but from the U.S. officials and their anonymous reports to the press yesterday, which literally was on this very same line of a story, they said that the Saudis basically called up and had a full-blown crash out over the situation. So we can get it down at this point that the Saudis did have a crash out over being told at the last hour that we're going to try and hit power plants in Iran, and they were scared that the Iranians were going to start blowing up all of theirs. And we have also been able to hear from other sources that, according to U.S. officials who have spoken to the Wall Street Journal, so at this point, folks, we're seeing that all of these anonymous U.S. official statements to the press are accurate. We just saw that on that prior example right there with what the president's saying today and what we heard yesterday, so we can generally take anonymous reports as credible information. And according to anonymous reports from more U.S. officials today, the Gulf states are actually all frustrated with a lack of strategy from the United States, and accordingly, Gulf allies are asking for more Patriot interceptors to conduct defenses of their skies, considering the risk that's coming around from what the U.S. might do, and also they're looking for security guarantees that the U.S. will protect Gulf states if the fighting continues. So the Gulf states are almost at the point, if we want to describe it this way, of mutiny against the United States. They've gotten incredibly tired, from what we're knowing at this point, of the U.S. not really putting them in the loop, although they really receive most of the blows from the Iranians. If they attack anyone, it's generally them. And so they're getting incredibly frustrated that the U.S. is willing to take all of the risk and let the Gulf states take all of the losses. And additionally, they're also getting incredibly angry, much like we all are, that the U.S. really has no overarching strategy against the Islamic Republic of Iran and don't really have any way that they even perceive that the war is going to end, whether it be in a U.S. victory or a defeat. So it is clear at this point that even the Middle Eastern countries are understanding that the situation is in limbo land and nobody has a clue where it's going. While the United States is saying, and the president has claimed, that they're going to be talking with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the Iranians put out in their state-run news networks today, including Fars, that they've denied the Strait of Hormuz reopening agreement. And according to a direct quote from their publishment, a military source says Strait remains blocked amid U.S. hostile actions, passage only by the IRGC Navy on designated routes. So we do understand that the Strait is closed. And while we do not believe, and I'll have to tell you, folks, do not believe a single word that comes out of Iranian state media, unless if it pertains to the actions that Iran is taking at a base level. These can largely be taken at face value right here, because of the Iranian state media saying they're not reopening the strait. We have seen enough times in the past, through the beginning of the first interim period and the second interim period, that is true, that they are not reopening the strait when they make that claim. So that is the one thing that we can take Iranian state media at face value for. But because of that, I have to say, folks, that today we're probably going to have to start making a change to the validity of some sources and reports that are coming out, because I've kind of mentioned this on the channel before, and I want to take a minute to talk about this, because whenever we strike a source for credibility, I kind of have to explain why. We're getting very much on the verge of striking all Israeli media outlets for any form of credibility, because I will tell you all that the amount of crap that's come out from Israeli news outlets that's just flatly false has been unreal. Yesterday we literally wasted our entire day. We had actually planned to get out and do some stuff. We wasted our entire day because 3 Israeli news outlets claimed that the U.S. was going to be bombing Iran literally any minute, and it turns out that they weren't. And we've seen that throughout the entirety of the conflict, the Israeli news outlets largely just run whatever stories they want. Most of the time, it's basically just like fan fiction is the best way to describe it, of what they're writing, more so than anything that's credible or factual. So according to another Israeli news outlet today, when the statement came out from Fars News that they were keeping the strait closed, the Israeli news outlets were stating, as a matter of fact, that the foreign minister had agreed to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, prompting the U.S. president to call off the planned retaliatory strikes. this statement doesn't align at all with reality. And so I'm going to say this, folks. Right now, we're putting most Israeli media sources into what I would call unverified sources or unverified reports that are generally not factual at all. And if I see another report like this that comes out that's just straight BS and drivel from Israeli news outlets, we're completely striking them from any sort of sources or reporting here on the channel because they do not appear to be accurate at all. So moving us on out of that brief update, just wanted to let y'all know that, so that way if you'll start seeing that all of the Israeli news sources are being completely cut out of coverage and you're wondering why, that's generally the reason why. The reality is showing one thing, they're reporting another. Outside of that, we also saw that IRGC naval forces did conduct strikes today within the area of the Strait of Hormuz. But before we get on into those strikes that we saw, U.S. officials did announce there was a possible deal that could be coming around with Iran. And hours later, they attacked an Iranian ship. Actually, let me get to that. Now that I'm reading the poll, I need to get to this part right here before we get to the poll. While the U.S. president said that we were getting into talks with the Iranians, and the Iranians really mean a great deal, and we're also seeing that the IRGC's Fars news outlet said that the Strait of Hormuz was not going to be reopened, and the Israelis then stated that it was being reopened. IRGC forces conducted an anti-ship missile attack against a commercial tanker within the strait, and according to the report that we got, the Iranian IRGC launched an anti-ship cruise missile from Surik towards the Strait of Hormuz per initial reports, with a likely target being an oil tanker sent by the U.S. that switched off its AIS an hour ago while passing through the U.S.-backed southern route. This came as the president simultaneously claimed just minutes ago that there's a deal on Hormuz and there will be a deal on denuclearization, with new Iranian negotiations to begin Monday afternoon. Not long after that report came out, the UK MTO also issued a report of an incident 20 nautical miles northeast of Kasab, Oman. The master of a tanker reported hearing an explosion in close proximity with the vessel, and the vessel and crew were reported safe. Later on, the Iranians then published a brief clip in picture showing a fire on board an oil tanker. We actually believe that this is the aftermath of the anti-ship
That's a
missile hit.
phony.
Huh?
That's a complete BS picture that they posted right there. That picture is not even from the proper date. This is like from some, I think this might be a Russian ship or something that's on fire. Like OSINT Technical put out, or excuse me, OSINT Defender put out a correction post about this and was saying that this is some other picture that's not right.
Interesting. Okay, so correction here.
It
This
should
is
be at the
not.
top. Let me see if I can grab that real quick, actually, so that way we can verify that real quick. So yeah, if you go to the likes tab right now, you'll see OSINT Defender's explanation for the picture and apparently where it might have come from.
Let's see here. So let me see if he attached photograph released approximately 30 minutes. Let's see. The Turkish authorities are widely circulated following. Oh, okay. So this is not an authentic picture. Still, the Iranians did publish it though, and they did claim that they had conducted an attack on the ship. We are able to confirm though that the Iranians did fire an anti-ship missile, and the UK MTO report does confirm that a ship came under attack. But that may not be an accurate picture reflecting the situation, because that picture is actually from the Black Sea. So I'm gonna have to eat my foot on that one there. I actually got that one incorrect. That is not an actual picture of the ship that the UK MTO report came from, just north of Kasab in Oman. But still, the fact that the Iranians did conduct an attack on a vessel within the area, regardless of the validity of that image, which I did get incorrect. Sorry about that, folks. We are able to see that a lot of people are talking about the current conditions within the Strait of Hormuz and whether or not the Iranians are actually going to be reopening the strait, or whether the U.S. will ever get a deal, in light of the fact that the Iranians did attempt an attack against a commercial ship within the Hormuz. So, Matthew, what are people thinking about that right now, and what are you thinking about that as well?
They said, sir, it's fake news. They're showing pictures, showing fires. This is what they're doing, showing fires. They said, sir, it's a real hot situation in the Hormuz Strait. Real hot. They said, that's so hot what's happening in the Hormuz. It's the hottest place on the planet, and right next to the United States, of course. Hottest place. Not like hell. It's like a good thing. But anyways, though, jumping into the poll right here, we do see that U.S. officials have announced a possible deal with Iran for the millionth time at this point. And hours later, Iran attacked some ships in Hormuz, or at least attempted to attack some ships in Hormuz. The pictures are phony, but the report is real. So what are your thoughts about that? 62% said the U.S. will simply continue stalling. They're going to keep on stalling until the end of time. While 28% said the U.S. will start attacking Iran soon, and 4% said Iran will agree to a deal very soon. And I would say,
I would say that they're going to continue stalling because the talk that came out today really put down my analysis the other day. They came out today and said that the attack they had prepared for Iran was bigger than World War II or as big as World War II or something like that. There's some like huge attack. That type of like bloviating language like that indicates that they're exaggerating to me. Like that's what that indicates. They're going way too overboard with the hyperbole, which indicates I'm not really sure if they were really intending on it. It sounds like a lot of bluster and not a lot of action. So I'll have to take back my analysis from the other day. I'm with the 62%. I think the U.S. will continue stalling, and Saudi Arabia probably did call up for real and ask them to hold off, but that doesn't mean we actually have to do it. I mean, we're a sovereign country. We can decide to attack anyway, regardless of what Saudi Arabia is saying, and they chose not to do it because honestly, the U.S. really didn't want to go in and actually do it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Oh, I would say that it's not that, we can do what we want because we can do what we want, but they can also do what they want and expel all of the U.S. forces out of Saudi Arabia immediately. So, that's kind of the problem is that all of our bases are in Saudi Arabia and the other Gulf states. And if we just tell them, F you, we'll do what we want, then they're going to say, okay, F you, then get out of our country. And,
Nah.
you can't do that any farther.
They can't do that extreme. Like there's still limits because I mean Saudi Arabia relies on buying a lot of stuff from us for their like interceptor missiles and things like that. So they're beholden to the U.S. just like any other country it's had a fight with. It's like for example Europe, Germany hadn't kicked us out of any of our bases there or anything like that just because we've gotten into a spat with them. So I mean we could attack Iran and Saudi Arabia might balk at it, but they couldn't just kick us out of the blue because then they'd be left high and dry with no more weapon cells.
Well, it's not like they're devoid of options. I mean, Saudi Arabia and most of the Gulf states could a lot more easily than the Europeans could just jump straight to China because it's not really like they conduct trades of like Mercedes cars. They're just transporting oil. So all they're doing is loading oil via a tube onto a ship and then selling that, and that's how they make their cash. So it's not really like, they have all of these trade relations where it's like, there might not be a market for that in China. They could just easily pack up and start moving towards China and start replacing all of their weapons slowly yet surely with Chinese bought weapons, and that probably end up getting rid of most of the problems they have with Iran. So, we always got to keep that kind of stuff, in mind because we always have the kind of like brash mindset of everyone could get effed, we'll do what we want. We can end up seeing that we could completely lose our sphere of influence in a couple of years, which would be detrimental for the country.
But at the same time, though, I mean, if a foreign country, let's say Saudi Arabia did call up and say, don't attack Iran. I mean, what was their reason for not wanting to attack Iran? I mean, what was we never got to hear the rationale behind it. And I would say at this point, I mean, if the U.S. stalling's hurting us and here in the United States, it's hurting us directly. It may not be hurting Saudi Arabia, but then again, it's like at some point the U.S. has to put our own interests over that of foreign countries. At some point, I get that Saudi Arabia might think that's going to cause retaliation on their country. But it's like right now we're still at the mercy of Iran because they control the Hormuz Strait. And until we take action to actually reverse that damage that's been done, then we're taking the hit for it. So I mean, what Saudi Arabia wants to do, like halt indefinitely on finishing the job, just so they can avoid having to fight back. It's like, what are they wanting?
Well, I didn't see them do that when we were bombing coastal forces, but when it started to come out that we were going to start bombing every power plant in Iran, that's when they did it. So it's not really showing that Saudi Arabia is just, tiptoeing around, oh, we don't really want you to hurt Iran. They're fine with us fighting Iran. They just don't want us to do it in a way where the Iranians are going to, basically screw everybody in the Gulf by bombarding every single power plant, desalination plant there is. And
But they're gonna do that anyway, though. I mean, if the U.S. even let's just say the U.S. avoids hitting desalination plants inside of Iran, we avoid the power plants too. Let's just say we go for the oil, like we start attacking the oil industry and the export terminals on the coast inside of Iran. I mean, Iran's still going to take to the extreme. Anything we do from this point forward, Iran's going to escalate from this point forward, and we have to take action. Like the longer we don't take action against Iran, the more we're getting harmed each and every day here in the United States. So I mean, Saudi Arabia is going to have to realize we don't want to go overboard and do something that causes Iran to start, going crazy, like doing something extremely wild. But they're going to have to understand that this is part of being in the Middle East. You're going to have to defend yourselves, and that's why we're selling them weapons to defend themselves and giving them interceptors is to protect their civilian population. So. I mean, last time it was at the request of Pakistan. Now it's at the request of Saudi Arabia. It seems like some new character showing up every single time we go to finish the job and telling us to back off.
Well, probably because we didn't give them any notification or keep them in the loop of what we were about to do until we're 1 hour away from it. And then we notify the Saudi government, by the way, we're going to blow up all their power plants, and we're going to do it from your territory. So anything that comes to pass, it's going to be directly affecting y'all. if an ally has a lack of communication like that, there's clearly going to be a crash out. They're going to lose it, and that's what they did. And that's why everything had to stop, is because, like always through the war, and like always with everything, much like the U.S. government won't even appraise the U.S. citizens of what's going on, they're not doing that either with allies in the Middle East. And I don't really know why we would expect that allies in the Middle East could be treated like dogs or slaves to the United States, and will do whatever they want. They just got to bear the consequence, and that they're not even owed an explanation of here's what we're going to do. And also, I don't even understand how in the world bombing an oil site, a power plant, or a bridge, or a desalination plant is going to be ending the war, when none of those are missile factories firing missiles into the Strait of Hormuz at commercial ships. It's the IRGC anti-ship and maritime forces that are in the strait, which should be our primary target, because it doesn't. It doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, but I would have to disagree there a little bit. Hitting their economic resources is the way to go. This war is going to drag out for some time. I'm pretty confident about that. This war is not going to be wrapping up quickly, unfortunately, with the Iran situation. So we want to go ahead and get the ball rolling on the economic damage that compounds itself over the course of months. We want to go ahead and start that up. We want to get that rolling, at least in my personal opinion. So the way to do that would be to hit the oil sites. That's the next move I would personally take, starting to hit their export abilities. Because yes, we have a blockade in the Persian Gulf, but that blockade is not completely, solid. It's permeable to a certain degree, because they're doing ship-to-ship transfers in the Persian Gulf. They're still getting oil out, and they're still selling it to people out of the Iranian regime. So they're still making money. So unless we start the ball rolling on that economic front, then we're not getting really much closer to ending this war right here. We have to make it very expensive for Iran to continue the situation, while we're also tending to the physical aspect by hitting the launchers on the coast. We have to have both.
Well, yeah, but conducting economic damage, though, like with the Russian example, Iran could continue to survive for another 3 years, or maybe even 2.5 years at the best case scenario. We're going to be in an oil crisis in 3 months. So what is trying to conduct economic damage on Iran have anything to do with the larger strategic situation, considering that the damage that we would be looking for would be inflicted 2 years after we have run out of oil here in the West because of the Hormuz blockade? That makes it clear that all of our action should be prioritizing the blockade and breaking the blockade, rather than trying to conduct magical damage that will coalesce in 2.5 years on critical infrastructure and economic institutions in Iran. Because with how long it's taken Ukraine to do it, and Ukraine's done it far more successfully than we probably could at this point, it's still taken 2 years, 2.5 years for Russia to see any real major impact, which we're finally seeing. So why in the world would we be doing that against Iran, considering that we're already going to be in a crisis point in 3 to 4 months' time from now?
It would happen faster, though, with Iran, in my personal opinion, because Iran's already starting from a very horrible foundation. I mean, we looked last night at the Iranian rial, the value of their currency. I mean, it's the worst in the world. So, I mean, Iran's starting from a much, much worse economic standpoint than Russia ever did. And it would be a lot easier to start taking down their economy. I mean, it's literally teetering on the edge right now. I mean, it's barely functioning as it is. So if you take away their main money-making initiative, which is the oil sales, and you prevent them from doing ship-to-ship transfers by hitting the export terminals, I mean, that would definitely cause some damage, definitely for sure. And it may take it a month or 2 or 3 months to compound. But I mean, the alternative is to keep letting them make money, which, in my opinion, is not the right way to go.
I would say that it'd probably be a better bet at this point to see that the U.S. conduct strikes against the maritime and anti-ship forces that are blockading the strait, and then trying to conduct economic damage, because economic damage could take a lot longer to be inflicted, and it's more so feeling that's guiding the thought that that would happen quick. We don't really have any real statistical way to know if it would happen quick, and there's a lot of external variables that could be involved, like Chinese support, which could make it a lot longer than anticipated. And then at that point, we're working off of a strategy that could be doomed to fail because of external variables that we're not accounting, when we know that we have a variable that we can account for, which is the IRGC's martial capabilities around the strait, which we can directly target and destroy, and watch the progress in real time, and most likely achieve results far faster than any kind of economic damage could, because we're in a race against time right now.
Really hasn't done much so far. Like, the U.S. has been hitting coastal targets, not as heavily as we would want, but they've been hitting them. Like, for example, before they started this new crap, a day or two ago about these talks coming back around, they were hitting the coast heavily for, like, what was it, the course of a week and a half, or roughly about a week. And they were hitting it nonstop with heavy bombers pretty consistently. And we're still seeing, even today, they're still attacking ships, and that still hasn't come to an end. So I'm not sure if that's going to prove to be effective to a large enough
enough to agree to actually reopen the strait. I just don't think it will, at least in its current form.
Well, I mean, a week isn't going to produce any results whatsoever. I mean, the air campaign in the Gulf War in 1991 lasted for 4 months before we began a ground offensive, and a breaking of the blockade with the Iranians would probably at minimum take a month. So I don't really know how we're expecting to get a fantastic result and an absolute victory in a week or a week and a half, when that clearly is not a realistic timetable to work off of for any sort of an air campaign.
I know. That's what I'm saying. Start the economic damage now, so when the war drags on, because it's not going to be ended very soon. We've seen that. They can go ahead and get that economic damage rolling, so that way in a couple of months they'll be really hurting at that point. They won't be making any money, and no money will be coming in. So therefore, that will start compounding on top of the strikes. They'll probably start back up at some point.
But the thing is, though, is that we have a time frame, like we have a window of time where we're going to lose this war in 4 months from now, probably, with the current drain on oil resources. So we can't say let's conduct damage and they'll get hit or they'll get hurt really badly in a year and it'll end. It's already ended 8 months before that. So we have to come up with a way to end the war or succeed in less than 4 months. So I don't really see that happening economically. I'd say that, in my opinion, militarily would be more so the correct answer, at least in my opinion, on trying to achieve results in the limited time window that we have. But moving us on out of that, because I think we're just going to have to agree to disagree, but moving us on out of that, we have been able to see a couple of more developments within the area. Satellite photography has actually shown that the USS Abraham Lincoln today was about 200 kilometers from Chabahar, Iran, quite literally within the very opening of the Strait of, well, more so the Gulf of Oman, and not within the northern Indian Ocean, showing that it is getting incredibly close at this point to the Iranian coastline, and it actually currently is within range of anti-ship missile batteries of the Islamic Republic of Iran along the coastline. So a little bit of an interesting development there, at least from what we could see from the Sentinel-2 satellite photography. Additionally, we've also been able to hear that from within the Iranian government, there has also been a statement today by the Iranian president, where he stated, the memorandum was signed the memorandum that was signed is a result of the collective wisdom of the Shura Council's members, and all members are in sympathy with it. I believe this memorandum will be the center of gravity of our foreign relations in the future. We must strive to compel the enemy to remain committed to what it has signed. The security of the country, the region, and our allies will be enhanced by this memorandum. So it appears that it was largely a statement about the prior memorandum of understanding. And additionally, we were able to hear that according to the Wall Street Journal, Iranian diplomats have stated that the IRGC is considering launching preemptive strikes against U.S. bases if diplomatic efforts collapse, even if the United States does not attack. So it's making it fairly clear that if they believe that the U.S. isn't really bending to their will, they're going to start preemptive attacks and start the war full out once more to be able to try and completely bury the United States under the attacks that they would be starting, and they would largely be hoping to operate them from their tempo from that point on. Meanwhile, in Israel, we've also been able to hear that apparently the U.S. Is apparently scaring the Israelis about what their position currently is in the Middle East, to paraphrase that for the larger part, and American Airlines has extended its suspension of flights to Israel all the way through to March 27th of 2027 next year, showing that they're expecting the instability to last for an incredibly long time, but of course that time window could always be adjusted to be a lot shorter. Additionally, we've also been able to see that within the Gaza Strip, the Israelis announced today, according to Channel 12, that Israel will not halt its Gaza operations unless Hamas completely disarms. And we also were able to see a major explosion within the Nabatea area in Module Zune, which we were able to see in this clip. Where you see the explosion right there in the distance. Weirdly enough, no audio. We also were able to see another video of the explosion. It appears to be an Israeli tunnel destroying operation from what we largely know at this point, but still quite a significant explosion to say the least. And lastly, we were also able to see the smoke rising from the explosion and the aftermath around the area of Module Zune. Moving us on out of the Middle East, though, and on into the rest of the news that we have from Ukraine, we were able to see that today, according to reports that came out, the Italian military has actually boarded the sanctioned tanker, the Tio Polo, which was flying the Cameroonian flag from Russia's Shadow Fleet by helicopter in the Mediterranean Sea of the West Island of Pantelleria. The captain initially refused to cooperate, and the inspection lasted 2 hours with no incident. The vessel sailing from Benin to Istanbul and under EU sanctions was checked, and the seized documents are being examined. Whether the tanker was detained remains largely unknown, but this appears to be a picture of the incident involving the Italian Navy and its boarding forces and the tanker in question, the Toa Payo. Moving us on out of that little bit of news in the Mediterranean, we have also been able to see some additional information coming out from the war in Ukraine, of which there has been a significant amount of. And so moving us on into that, first and foremost, we were able to see the Russian casualty report of the last 24 hours. And ole mole, 2 Bobcats.
2 Bobcats. It's very nice. Very nice.
And according to Miss Deetz, keeper of the records, Russian losses from on August 2nd of day 1,621 is 8 MLRSs tied for 4th and the highest day loss since October of 2023, and 11 ground robotic complexes is tied for 9th. And over the course of the past 24 hours, we were able to see that 1,500 Russian soldiers have been wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 10 APCs, 456 supply trucks, 69 artillery pieces, 1,788 drones, 8 MLRSs, 2 cruise missiles, 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, and 2 Bobcat skid steers, along with the 11 ground robotic complexes, which aren't shown on the infographic. But it does look like the Ukrainians are still doing pretty damn well. While they're doing quite well, it appears that the Belarusians are also trying to make their own strides in modernizing or increasing the combat forces of their military, as Belarus is now forming the 37th Separate Air Assault Brigade in Gomel. The 2nd Battalion, support units, and other structures are currently being created, and it looks like the Belarusians are trying to expand the amount of offensive capabilities that the Belarusian armed forces have integrated within them. It's a fairly interesting sort of a development there, but before we move on further into it, it actually looks like we have a poll to cover. So, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so jumping back for a second, we had a poll on Iran that we need to cover real quick. How will the Iran war unfold over the next month as rumors of a deal begin to spread? And it looks like 68% said the war will continue on and off over the next month, while the 25% of the audience said a full-scale regional war is probably coming around very soon, and 4% said a deal will actually be signed. And I still don't think a deal is going to get signed. I don't think so. Obviously, at this point, Iran has already turned down the favorable deal, so I don't think they'll be signing another one. And the U.S., if they agree to one, it's going to be the worst deal in the history of the country. It would have to be, because the other deal was already bad enough. So I'm with the 25%. I think a full-scale regional war is coming around the corner. We have seen more airliners canceling flights to the region for an extended period of time. I think they think it's coming soon as well. And all the warnings that were sent out to all the embassies and consulates around the region, this deal talk is simply a stalling tactic, I would say. So it's going to probably have to escalate. The U.S. will probably end up doing this eventually. They might wait until maybe the midterms or something to start launching heavy attacks on Iran until afterwards. It's no telling how they're going to do it. But I would say I'm with the 26%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'll be with the 26%. It most likely will have to turn into a regional war. If they continue the war on and off, we'll most likely start to see that there are fuel shortages within most of the Western world eventually because of the blockade on the strait, which will start to skyrocket oil prices per barrel and will also lead to significant financial and also fuel crises in most of the Western world. So the war will have to eventually go into a full-scale regional war. I just wouldn't be able to tell you all when that's going to be, because based off of the actions of the current administration, they might not ever do that, and then we might enter that significant shortage, or we might get into the full-blown regional war and eventually break the blockade and actually see that oil transits through the strait are doable or possible. So moving us on out of that little poll and on into our Ukraine war news, we have also been able to see that outside of the situation in Gomel, there has been some interesting developments along the Ukrainian front lines throughout the day. But circling back to this, because we didn't really give that proper justice, at least at this point, the Belarusians are forming a new 37th Separate Air Assault Brigade, which largely appears to be something along the lines of a VDV unit using helicopters, which would show that they're trying to get some sort of a fast attack unit that can rapidly advance, land, and hold ground for a temporary period of time until they're relieved by a larger attacking force. Generally, these sorts of units are almost obsolete in the current war. We saw that the VDV attempt at the landing at Hostomel was an abysmal failure, and before the Russian forces could even get down to Hostomel to relieve those VDV forces, they'd already been wiped out and routed from the airfield, and the runway had also been cratered as well, rendering it completely unusable for the Russian Air Force to be able to operate from and bring in additional forces and equipment. So we would generally expect that this Belarusian unit may be trying to expand some of their combat capabilities, because right now now, they literally only have 2 infantry regiments, and that's the entire fighting force of the Belarusian army. The rest of it is largely logistics and support forces, but this sort of a unit isn't really geared towards modern warfare in any real way. It could be used like light infantry on the ground as a highly mobile unit, but even still, with the war in Ukraine being how it is, that also appears that it wouldn't really work too well doctrinally either. If they created a mechanized infantry regiment, then we might actually be a little bit concerned, but this one doesn't really appear to be having that much of an impact on their offensive or defensive capabilities. Moving us on out of that, though, and into the Sumy area, we've also been able to see that Russian logistics were hit today by the Ukrainian Prime unit. Apparently they drank that juice that one guy, that Paul dude, was making, and now they decided that they're going to go out and hit Russian logistics. So let's take a look. Oh, dang. A little bit of a clown car. Ooh.
They drove straight into it.
Man, they drove right into that bee. They also hit this Buhanka as well, carrying a trailer. And also this Buhanka. Everyone actually bailed out of that one beforehand.
Oh, man. I thought the captain was supposed to go down the ship, but that guy got out and bailed for his other men, dude.
Bro, that guy had lightning fast reflexes, bro. He said, shit, bro. He ran out immediately. Man, I wonder if he does that all the time.
Probably so. I would imagine so. If he still survived this long, he's got to be good at bailing.
Man, I gotta tell you something, man. He's better at bailing than the U.S. government is.
Ooh.
Ooh. Would you look at that right there? But moving us on from that clip inside the Sumy area, we also were able to see along the rest of the front lines that within the Lyman direction, the Ukrainian 144th SOF's unit was also shooting down a Russian drone.
І чую якусь хуйню. Ага, уходить.
He's
Побачив, що
saying
наші.
it's out there.
Ого.
You now see him running out into the rye field, it seems. And he's fired at the drone, and it went down. They got it.
Да.
Look at that. The
Кажи, хай
skill.
продовжуй далі рух, ми ззаді контролем.
Holy smokes, folks. The skill here is impeccable. Truly unbelievable, to be entirely honest with you. Those Ukrainian special forces, they're like marksmen. They can hit stuff in the air, moving at speed, at a significant distance. Truly marksmen, every last one of them. But moving us on out of that, we also were able to see that in the Slavyansk area today, unfortunately, a Russian airstrike was able to cause damage to the Chervkivsky Bridge in the Slavyansk Donetsk Oblast, and as a result of the hit, one span of the concrete structure collapsed, and at the moment, it's believed that one civilian was killed as a car was actually traveling across the bridge in the middle of the strike, and the car actually overturned as the span collapsed below it, and apparently the explosive force also flipped the car as well. So, unfortunately, there appears to be at least one civilian fatality from the strike at the moment, and it also lists that the Russians are trying to hit bridge works in the rear line areas to be able to try and impact the Ukrainian logistics efficiency. Moving us on out of that bit of news, within the Slavyansk area, we also got to see that down in the Konstantinivka direction, the Ukrainians were continuing to hit and destroy Russian armed forces, this time in the National Police. See that drone come on in, and it did its work, you know, fine and dandy and all. It also hit a Russian outpost right there as well. And we also see them hitting this stranded fiber optic, it appears. Hopefully.
A little microwave would fix that right up.
Oh, real?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It would burn the electronics out.
Man, my question is, though, how do we get the drone to fly into the microwave? If we disguise it like a vodka store, would it fly into it?
You just throw it in the microwave like a hot pocket and cook it up 2 minutes.
2 minutes? That's quite a cooking time. Wouldn't it be like bouncing around in there? Wouldn't it be angry? Wouldn't it be going feral, like that kind of a deal?
It might.
We'll have to keep that in mind. You know, I was actually thinking, Matthew, maybe we made like a little droplets of like motor oil on the ground, and then we had a little box of rat poison at the end of it. Would the drone eat the rat poison and then largely fade away and pass on due to its internal injuries because of the consumption of the poison?
I mean, that's an idea. I've always thought personally that a space-based low-orbit satellite that can shoot a high-powered laser down at a very precise target, that's probably the best way to handle drones. Just send in an order to a satellite to hit it.
Actually, I'm thinking that a giant oversized fly swatter would probably do the trick. You know, just get one with like a 20-foot long pole and, you know, just have like the strongest guy in the unit hold that thing. And when the drone comes in, you swat it into the ground, you know? I feel like that might work a little bit.
Yeah, you could also use it to grill a hamburger patty with when you're done with it.
Exactly. You could even get this one that has SWAT on it, so that way when you hit it, you can go SWAT, and then you can get it. Or better yet, folks, I have an even better idea. What if we got a barrel full of water and put a false floor on top of it that has one pivot point, and whenever a drone sits on top of it because they're trying to get to the little bits of like bird seat that we put on top of it, the false floor actually flips, the drone falls into the water, and then it shorts it out. I think that might be an interesting idea. Better yet, I have another one, folks. I have one more. Not to keep going on with this, but I have one of them. What if we brought out like a lady that has like a good singing voice, the equivalent of Snow White or something, and we put her out there on the battlefield, and she just starts singing and lilting a wonderful tune, and she basically just serenades all the drones into being like pet drones, kind of like the birds in the movie Snow White. I think we're on to something, folks. People, we need to have the CIA on top of this, and they need to start pouring tens of billions of dollars into these research projects. One of them has to work. But moving us on from that joke, though, we also were able to see that within the Donetsk area, the Ukrainian armed forces were continuing to hit and destroy Russian logistics around the city of Donetsk, including this truck, which is burning in the middle of the highway.
Ooh, driving right through it right there. That paint's gonna have a nice clear coat burned straight off of it.
Oh, it's going to be wonderful, boy. Man. Man, this guy had to get his reaction clip. Real shit. We also got to see in the Pokrovsk run that the Ukrainians were continuing to hit Russian for. Actually, we already showed you all that clip. So moving us on out of the Pokrovsk area, it's actually now time for us to circle on around and see if there is a speech from President Zelensky. I didn't put one down on the map today, but let me go see if there is. Hopefully there is. He made one yesterday, so there is a chance. There is a chance that there is not one today, sadly. So we have no speech from President Zelensky, unfortunately. But that is the end of our news for the day, all things considered, now that we don't have a speech from Zelensky. But I gotta say, humongous thanks to each and every single one of y'all who has been watching tonight, because we had a peak viewership tonight of 19.8 thousand people.
Whoa.
That's quite a lot of people. I mean, damn, like humongous number. And 113,000 people have watched the stream before the news section ended here, 2 hours and 5 minutes in. We're about to be moving on into our question segment where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. We get to answer all kinds of questions, as long as they do not pertain to religion, politics, climate change, whether the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare or not, whether the U.S. should nuke Iran in certain situations. It's time to get into everything that's not those 5 topics. That list keeps growing slowly yet surely over the course of 4.5 years. In the future, it will probably be a very extensive list. But nonetheless, before we get into any of that, we need to shout out any of the top donors that we've seen between the last segment where we called them out and this one. So, Matthew, what do we got there?
All right, so far the fundraiser is up to about 2,520 smackaroos. A smackaroo is a generalized currency, which we call also USD. But apparently, it looks like the fundraiser is doing fantastic, and we've only had one top donor since the last time we called them off. And this one goes to MW5327, who put in a $50 support to the fundraiser. And a huge shout out to you, MW, for that generosity as well. And a big shout out to the entire LSA for once again helping us get well above that goal. Quite swell-like, I must admit. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I'd have to give a huge shout out to everyone once again, who did all of this impressive work raising these funds for Nova Ukraine. It's wonderful stuff. It helps out many Ukrainian people. And I think that's absolutely incredible, folks, because the war's been going on for 1,621 days, and people are still supporting the nonprofits that are helping out people in Ukraine. That's amazing. Honestly, unbelievable. And so I got to say a humongous thanks to everybody who's been supporting the fundraiser once again, because it has gotten up to a whopping, fantastic, eye-watering, unbelievable. Eventually the screen will load so I can actually see the exact number. $2,520. That's quite a lot. And so, with that in mind, it is now time for us to get on into the questions. Matthew, please take it away. What do we got here?
All right, so jumping into our super chats and also our live chat questions and also our Morse code decoders of the night, we're jumping straight back into our super chats. And our first one is going to go to Rosalie Love, who put in a $20 support. And thank you very much, Rosalie, for that 20. And she said, thanks for zapping the bots. And I try to zap the bots from time to time. I try to put the microwaves on the bots, as they call it, which is the banhammer. In other words, Matt's banhammer, a proprietary technology, of course. It's something that the world's never seen. Nobody knows bot swatting quite like Matt. They said, sir, that Matt, he knows how to put the bots down. He knows how to put them down, sir. He puts them down in many ways, they say. A lot of ways, different ways. That's what they say, sir. It's a strange thing. But you have to understand, though, that when you put a bot down, you have to do it humanely. I mean, you can't just like go around and put a bot down with just like, by just lowering them down. You have to put them down with a forklift and lower them down to the concrete, sir. But anyways, though, what say you?
Well, I'd have to say, well, you're welcome. Matthew smacks most of the bots. I get like one or two of them here and there every once in a while. But Matthew is the bot smacker. He's the official smacker of the bots, and he'd be smacking them pretty well lately. Pretty well. We've been actually getting a lot more of them recently than normal. So either the bot farms are up and running again, or we have come under the radar of a whole new bot farm that's just never been here, and they're starting to flood on in. And then also there's of course the usual number of people in the middle of that who are actual people who have like no sense, or they're just absolutely nuts. So it's something else right there, something else. But anyways, a huge thanks to you once again for support, and with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Old Warrior Fellow, who puts in a 20. And thank you, Old Warrior, as well for that support. He said, you spoke at a Hornet drone. It was developed by a U.S. company founded in 2023, as well as individuals associated with the U.S. technology sector, too, including some former CEOs, according to Old Warrior Fellow. And are you sure about the Old Warrior? I'm not doubting you, but at the same time, though, I could have sworn that the Hornet was a Ukrainian domestically produced drone, because Ukraine was trying to sell it to the Middle Eastern states about a month or two ago. They were trying to license and sell it. So if it's made by a U.S. company, it seems kind of weird that they would be trying to license it out like that. So maybe so. Voice crack. But Enforcer, what say you?
Maybe. Man, I have so many of those. Man, I have like a freaking million of those, man. Like I'll sit there in the middle of the news. Anyways, it's like, damn. But beyond that though, I'm looking at their website here, and it doesn't really show that they're cooperating at all with the United States. They listed their partners are all Ukrainian. So I'm not saying that that's wrong. That probably is true, that a U.S. company might have been involved in helping develop the Wild Hornet, but they probably are not at all involved in producing it here in the States or even marketing it here in the States. They probably just saw a money-making opportunity in Ukraine. And so they help that company to get off the ground a little bit, and they get a little bit of profits kickback, whatever you like to call it, from the drones that are being produced and the profits of that company. But it doesn't look like they're really involved at all in producing that thing here in the United States. And on top of that, we would generally know that that is the case because the U.S. was talking about acquiring Wild Hornets or Wild Hornet manufactories here in the States, where the Wild Hornet company would come over from Ukraine and use their technical expertise to set up the factories and start operating them here in the States to produce those drones for the U.S. military. So I would say that I generally assume that that's true, but it doesn't look like that's really resulted in any direct U.S. involvement in producing, procuring, or using Wild Hornets in any way, at least from what I could find quickly. But a big thanks to you for support, Old Warrior Fella, and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to none other than RCH Technologies, who said a person in here who disrespects our national anthem while it's playing should go take that crap elsewhere. And it's the best opening ever, not the worst. USA, Texas, and LSA. I think those people are like, I understand like if people, get tired of hearing it every single night, like if you're here often, like it might get repetitive. But at the same time, though, it's like the people that really go berserk over the national anthem playing at the beginning. It's like why? It's like it's the U.S. national anthem. It's like, I would imagine these same people wouldn't go berserk about hearing another country's national anthem playing. I would imagine. So I don't know why it's such a big deal, really. And also, by the way, the intro allows people time to get on the stream and also pile in, so they don't miss the news in case they just got the announcement or the notification, and also gives us time to greet people and also generally get our bearings about us before we start talking on the air. So there's a reason for it. Like when you click the start button, you gotta let the adrenaline come down a little bit before you start talking on the air. So it serves a purpose, I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
You know, we never really we've always gotten a small trickle of complaints about the intro. Not this one, but the intro in general. And I always find that to be kind of silly because some people go, "Oh my god, this intro is so long." And a lot of people used to not say that until it became American centric. And so then, like, back in the day when it was all Ukrainian, some people were like, "Oh, I love this. It's just so wonderful and it's so cheery." While they're literally listening to songs in the Ukrainian language, they were talking about, "We threw some guy down the well and drowned him," and it's in Ukrainian, so they don't know that's the lyrics. They're like, "Oh, it's a wonderful lilting tune." And then once we put in U.S. music, people are like, "God, I hate America." It's like, okay, well, you might hate America, I don't. And it's like, we're going to keep running that anthem until the end of time. It costs way too much money to get rid of the thing. And so that, for one, is making sure that it's staying around. And secondly, I like it. Like, I like the intro. I think it's very American. Well, it is very American. It's not, I think it is. It's literally all American music. But I'd have to say it's not going to be going anywhere. And generally, I'd say, if someone doesn't like the national anthem and they don't like the Armed Forces medley or they don't like the LSA anthem, what's the issue? I don't really understand why any of those songs would be hated or disliked. You're watching news from a news channel that supports American interests and Western interests around the world. So if you have a problem with the U.S. anthem, you probably have a problem with our outlook here on the channel. So maybe you need to find another one. I've heard, folks, that there's some great channels out there who really do say that they care for America, but they don't. Maybe those would be the ones you'd like to go to if you don't like the anthem. But I would agree with you, RCH.
Oh,
Now,
yeah?
oh yeah.
Spill the tea.
Oh, we want to get into dropping names? Like, man, like we're gonna
Man, I'm
start.
about ready to fire some beef back up again. It's getting a little bit stale around here. I'm about ready to fire some beef back up.
Oh well, I'd say that probably like I'd say
I'm
really.
joking. I'm
Oh
joking. I
no,
don't
no.
want all that crap.
No, your joke was accepted and it was taken seriously. So we're gonna start beef, everyone. Tonight's Argentine beef night, and I'm gonna tell y'all that the number one person that we need to beef with is man, like I'm just playing. Man, I was getting you psyched out. Hopefully, but beyond that though, all jokes aside, there are some people who are like that. Of course, one of probably the more popular names, at least is how I would see them, would be old Tucky G. Because a lot of it's like I love America, but then like a lot of what he says is basically like America's flawed and it's wrong, and all these other dictatorial countries are what we should kind of strive to be. And so I would say that probably is one, but there's a many of others out there. I'm not going to get into naming out all of them, but that's certainly probably the most known one. But anyways, I do think it incredibly would support RCH Technologies, and that intro is going nowhere. It's going nowhere. And so a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, and long live the Lee Spring Army, and of course, long live the Republic. And so with that, we're on the next one.
Also, folks, the reason why we had to stop beefing, like we had to stop that a long time ago. I'm sure y'all realize that that had to
Too
come to an
expensive.
end. Like it's too expensive now. The pound, the beef per pound is just too expensive. The poundage is simply too costly these days due to inflation. Also, a little bit of greed mixed in too. So that did away with all the fighting. Everybody's too broke to fight now. They just have to sort of like just fester in it and let it revel. And they didn't really get to carry it out. But anyway, so our next one here goes to Justin, who put in a 10. And Justin said, again, I want to donate to Ukraine, but I can't, sadly. But my best to everybody from Australia.
I really hate that. I really hate that the Australian viewers and the New Zealanders can't. It's been like that the whole time, and it still is. I don't know why, but I do thank you greatly for the support and help with this channel to keep it running, so that way this channel can keep rolling and keep running the fundraiser. So I guess that's a positive way of looking at it. But a humongous thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And I see some people in the chat talking about America. Some people are like, I love America. Some people are like, I hate America. Those people don't stay around too long. There's very, very few of them that I'm seeing in the chat. But, like, I don't really get the whole point of people being born in a country and raised in a country and hating their country, because it's the only one you have. There's really no way to become a national or a citizen of another country. It's very difficult, and usually a lot of countries are not willing to take you in. Like, that's the honest truth of it. Like, if you want to go to Japan, Like right now, they have a humongous anti-immigrant sentiment in Japan. You can't even really go there and try and become a citizen anymore, or even just a long-term resident, I believe is one of the legal definitions they have. You can't even really do that at this point. And so you can't really do that in really any European countries, and you sure as hell don't want to do that in an enemy state like Russia, China, or Iran. You're going to be looked at as the enemy, and you're going to be discriminated against greatly because of that. So really, like as far as Americans go, and as far as it goes for us, America is the only country you have, and it's the only country you're going to be from. So why in the world hate it? Because who you are is a lot of what America is. Like if you think that America's too greedy, I mean, like usually a lot of people in America are quite materialistic. I mean, the country is only a reflection of the people that make it up in the hundreds of millions, and it comes out as just some sort of an abstract sort of thing. And so why in the world hate the country and wish for its downfall when you're a part of that ship and you're begging for the ship you're on to sink so you can drown? Why in the world argue that when you could argue that you find flaws in your country, and because you care for your country and your countrymen so much, you want to see it improve for the betterment of every?
Because it's all in the mind. It's all in the mind. If people feel like they're downtrodden and feel like they don't have a voice, then naturally they resort to the hatred, which is really illogical because it's like, where else are you going to go? What are you going to do? Leave America and just go flee to Thailand or something? It's like, yeah, I mean, you can do that. I mean, technically you can go get a visa and go flee to a country like that. But I guarantee you, you'll be back in 6 to 12 months. You're not going to stay because you're not going to like it because it's not, you didn't grow up there. It's not your environment and you won't know anybody there either. I'm saying it's going to be hard to assimilate. And other countries require you to assimilate for the most part. Unlike America, America's a melting pot of a large degree. But these days, people really don't want to melt. These days, they just want to have pot with no melt. But no pun intended. Hey yo, they just want to have the pot with no melt. I guess that's the best way to put it. But yeah, honestly, there's nowhere else for people to go. So it's like instead of running from your problems, it's like the best thing to do is to simply say, okay, like this is where I grew up. This is my place. That's my home. So I need to fix it, and it's possible to fix it. I'm not going to let the government make me feel like I'm downtrodden, where I don't have a voice. Like if people exercise their voice and use a little bit of intelligence and organized, which is your right in this country, First Amendment, then you could make change. Like you definitely could. But there's too many people these days that are just like out of their minds. They're in like a political camp, and they're too bought into the idea of a political party to understand that your voice only has power if you're not falling in line with the party politics. And people don't seem to get that.
And they don't really seem to get that too well. And also, folks, I would say, because I see a lot of people saying, if you don't like it, go to Pol Pot's Cambodia. And I'm not like wishing anything bad upon people who hate the United States that are Americans. If they hate the United States and they're an American, I don't get it, but I'm also not going to wish anything bad on them. They have a right to hate America as much as I love the country. That's kind of the odd thing about America, really, is that it's one of the few countries where you can live in it, where you can actually say that you hate the country and the government isn't going to come down and, tie you up and execute you because you said you didn't like the country or put you in prison in like a slave labor camp. One thing I would say, though, is that whenever you hear anyone, folks, that says that they don't really like America and they hate the country, don't treat them poorly, because all you're doing is corralling them into a corner, and you're going to make them hate the country even farther, because they're going to take you as a representation of the country. Always try and treat them well, and try and be an example of what America is. I would say generally treat them like a foreigner that's visiting the country on vacation, and try and greet them and be like, oh, this is what America really is. I don't know what you've been living through your whole life or what's making you think that, but there's a lot of good things about America, and try and be a good example to them.
Yeah, also, by the way, like if anybody is entertaining the Thailand idea, by the way, like for example, if you have 100,000 USD, like let's just say you have 100,000 USD in savings or your like retirement account or something, and you said, I'm cashing it in, I'm heading out to Thailand. The only benefit I could see to that really is you could live it up in Thailand for a while, because I think the buying power is like 3 to 1. So if you have 100,000 USD and you go to Thailand, you essentially have 300,000 USD of buying power when you translate the currency and also the different levels of like bills that cost differently inside of Thailand. You could get basically 3 times your money's worth out of living there. But it's like at what cost though? I'm like, if you're not from that culture, you're not from that environment, it's like a different world. So you're going into an environment that's completely foreign. To some people that might be appealing, but to most people, it sounds like a good idea in their head. But once they try to exercise it, they realize
realize, that really wasn't such a great idea after all. I probably want to go back to my homeland, which is America, that I grew up and was born in. So, it is interesting though that the buying power in other countries, you can live it up like a king in some countries, based on like the cost of living there. You can take your American money, translate it into the other currency, and live there like a king, but you'll be an outlier though.
Yeah, and you'll never blend in with the local populace, and that's something that's really interesting. Even in America, that can kind of be the case as well, because if you're born and raised in an area, you get used to certain kinds of customs and little details that you don't really think about a whole lot. But when people are not doing them, you notice it immediately, and it's actually a really like the little details are really the big details in how people think about you. Like, if you go to Japan as an American, they're going to look at you as being loud and obnoxious because nobody in Japan, really in most countries around the world, are as loud and outspoken as we are here in the States. And so they're going to look at you as, well, it's like kind of abrasive, really. It's like this guy is loud, outspoken. Oh no, that's just not really what we're used to. And that seems like a really small thing, but when you go to a foreign country, it's kind of affronting their entire culture in a sense. And so it's really like I kind of hate to say it this way, but you're kind of locked into being an American if you're an American because much like everyone else from every other country is, it's very hard to get into another country and assimilate absolutely. Like you can assimilate to a degree and pick up certain sorts of customs and what they consider to be polite social company and the manners and etiquette involved in that, but you'll still be looked at as an outsider. One thing
Oh
that's actually
yeah.
kind of unique though
Just
about the United States is that you can really get away with a lot of variety here, and you're not really looked at as an extreme outsider, like you would be in other countries in some places.
Yeah, just ask the Americans that said, like I'm moving out of America because it sucks. I'm moving to Russia because it's so much better and they're so traditional. It was so traditional they ended right back up in old style World War II trench warfare when they got conscripted and thrown on the front lines. It was very traditional, very very traditional. Threw them right back into a different era when they threw them out there like that. So really fantastic. It's like the Russians love foreigners, which they really don't. But also, by the way, there's a thing called a digital nomad visa. Have you heard of that?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, there's these things called digital nomad visas that some countries offer. Spain is one of those countries, by the way. I know a lot of people want to go to Spain these days. They want to go there and hang out. They let you live abroad in those countries for about 6 months to 2 years while you're working for an out of country employer, which I believe you can be self employed like we are and go do something like that. So you can go over there. But the catch is this, though. I think you get taxed in that country and you also get taxed by the IRS too. So I think at that point you're paying double taxes unless I'm mistaken on that. So the tax situation gets complicated quick. And also, not to mention, it's like, what are you going to do over there for a short period of time like that? It's like, I mean, it's like a long-term vacation, but you're uprooting your whole life to do that. And also, you're having to like bring your business over there and work from a different country, which has a totally different time zone and everything. You're basically around the world when you go to Europe for the most part. So I see a lot of people saying crypto bros love that a lot. I have seen that. Like a lot of people have gone down to Mexico City too. Like they'll go down there on a digital. I think they have digital nomad visas for Mexico too, and you'll have a lot of like tech workers that go down there for that. And the Mexican folks are complaining about they're being run out of their own city, like in Mexico City and around the area, because they've driven the price so high because all these digital nomad type people moving down there that the natives can't even afford to live there anymore. They've been driven out.
And all these countries love this because they get a little bit of money out of the American pocket. It boosts the local economy, like in Mexico City, where everything's becoming more expensive. It's becoming more expensive because there are influxes of people who can afford it. And it's like it's a benefit on a national level, but it's not a benefit for the local people. And then that also creates the animosity of, you damn American, you're moving into my country and you're making it unaffordable to live here. It's kind of the same thing, like also to add in with Californians, because Californians are some of the wealthiest Americans in the country. So whenever they move anywhere, they start to jack the prices up pretty quick because the locals
Their
realize
buying
that
power.
yeah, they have so much purchasing power that people start to raise prices to match their purchasing power. And then all the locals start going, these damn Californians are moving in and they're ruining the place because I can't afford to live here anymore because they are outspending me like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 because they're coming in with their California levels of bucks and I just don't have that kind of money.
Yeah, that's how you sour national relations really quick, is doing stuff like that. I mean, that's happening here domestically in the United States too. I mean, some places that have lower cost of living, some of these people that live in states like California and New York are starting to get so fed up with the cost of living being astronomically high in like California and New York that they're moving to other places. Like here in Salt Lake City, there's a lot of California people moving here, and they're moving to Salt Lake City, and the locals constantly complain about they're being priced out of the rent and all the rentals in the whole place, and also the housing too, because of all this influx of California money coming in, and the folks in California are making higher salaries than those people in Utah, so their buying power is higher, and the people selling homes and renting are seeing that, and they're jacking the rates up to cash in on it. So that's a problem all over the place. That's a huge problem.
Yeah, it is a pretty big problem. But getting all the way back to the original statement, like yes, man, we started going deep down a rabbit hole. Like if someone doesn't like the country, treat them well, folks. I mean, there might be a reason why they hate the country. It might be that they've been treated poorly by most people that they know growing up, and so they got a negative view of the country for that reason, or it could be that they've been getting kind of radicalized online to hate the United States from foreign groups that are, trying to subvert generally people's mindsets here in the country. So they could just be misinformed, and they could be looking at the negative when there's a lot of positives. Never treat people who hate, never treat American citizens here in the United States that hate America as bad people. There's definitely a reason somewhere out there, whether it makes sense or not, that they hate the country, and never be a part of that to only reinforce their hatred of the country. Always try and be nice to them, and always try and invite them to do stuff with you, because while they might hate the country, they are nice people. And if you show them an example of a person who's proud of their country, but is also proud to share that happiness and joy with others, that will probably do a lot more to turn them around into being generally patriotic people as well, because they'll see that there is good in this country, and the people in this United States are very kind, generous, and very compassionate people, like we should be. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a $20 super chat from Chef Danny B. And thank you very much, Chef Danny, for that 20 once again. And he said, good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here. And I definitely missed the whole intro and LSA. And y'all get the beef ready, and I'll finish cooking it for you, JK. Or am I in LLT LSA? And also, Chef Danny knows one of the beefs that we keep quiet that we're kind of irritated about. He knows one of them, but we don't air it out on the air, like, for the most part. Like, we try to avoid that. We obviously have our irritations with some other YouTubers out there, definitely. I think people that are discerning news viewers also have an irritation with some of these channels too. But we just stay in our lane these days. We let people make up their own minds about stuff like that, and we don't say it out loud, even though we would like to. We just avoid it because it gets really messy really quickly. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to agree. There's I would have to say though, folks, on the bright side, we get along and we have very good relations with every single YouTuber that we know of. Like, we like at the beginning when we started, and it was just the Ukraine war news category. There were a lot of people that we did not get along with in that sphere. Funnily enough, a lot of those people still aren't even, or they're not even around anymore running YouTube channels on Ukraine. They've either just moved on to totally different stuff because it was kind of just like a political thing basically for them, like a domestic political matter. So they just got lost attention and moved on, or they've completely quit. But beyond that, though, we get along with a lot of folks. And I think it's better to look at the positive, not to be a politician here, but it's better to look at the positive than the negative. I mean, we get along with a lot of folks these days on YouTube, like, let's see, Dennis Davidoff, Preston Stewart, Cappy Army. Let's see here, who else? Civdiv.
Patty Mayo.
Yeah, Patty Mayo. Patty Mayo's here every night. Huge fan of the channel. Let's see here. I don't know if Joe Rogan watches every night, but he follows us on Twitter, so that's something in a sense. I mean, there's a lot of people who really enjoy the channel and watch it, and really enjoy what we do. And I have to say that generally I enjoy most of the content they make. So there's really only one person that I can think of that we kind of have a bit of an irking with, but I'm not even going to get into the details of it because it's a technicality thing and it's really annoying to us, but it is what it is at this point.
I want to know why Joe Rogan followed our Twitter page. I'm just curious. Obviously, it's pretty cool to have him following the Twitter page. If he followed the Twitter page just because he had heard like an impression or something on the stream instead of the news, I would be laughing my head off if that was the case.
is dying.
It's like I just wonder why. It's like maybe he saw like an update or something like that. Although I checked, like, just out of curiosity, because we still don't know why he followed the Twitter page like to this day. We don't talk to him personally. Like, it'd be cool to like meet him and stuff like that. But we haven't talked to him personally. He just follows the Twitter page. It seems like it only follows people that he's generally like a big fan of for the most part. It doesn't look like he follows OSINT pages for the most part that I could tell. It looks like he just follows people that he's interested in, like personally, I guess.
Straight up, man, I really just want to ask him, because he's followed us on Twitter, but I don't think he's ever DM'd us, and we've also never been invited on a show. I'm generally not expected to be invited on a show, by the way, folks, but I'm just like deeply fascinated. I would like to get an answer. Why did he follow us out of everybody he could have followed? Because it's just fascinating. It's like, what was interesting about what we're doing to get followed? Like, I don't know. Like, it's still a mystery to both of us. And every once in a while, we're like, why did he follow us? And I was like, I don't know. It's like, maybe he likes our coverage. Maybe he likes our jokes, or maybe he just likes one or the other. It's like, I don't know. Maybe both. Who knows? Has to be something, though. Maybe he just saw a good tweet that was put out and he followed for that. I don't really know.
Man, if it was a good tweet that was put out, man, I've been grinding on that Twitter for years at this point, like trying to get that Twitter page. We're up to 80.4 thousand followers on Twitter, by the way, which is wild. I'm glad it finally paid off too, because for a long time I was on that Twitter page. I was like trying to build it up into something, and it really wasn't doing a whole bunch. I was like, I remember we had a lot of discussions in the background. Like, is it really worth like, all this trouble if it's really not going anywhere? I was like, I'm like, I'll keep going anyway. So I just kept like, like spinning the hamster wheel on it to a large degree. And now it's up to 80.4 thousand. It's actually like in the OSINT community on Twitter. It's one of the largest pages on there, actually. It gets a very consistent exposure these days. I think it finally hit the Twitter algorithm, where it's like most of the tweets I put out are getting like 50,000 views and higher, which is pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, the Twitter's doing really good. For crazy enough, folks, the YouTube these days is doing better than it ever has. And that's really one of the craziest things, is that recently, folks, we've kind of leveled back off into what I would call status quo as far as how the viewership's going. But that is a far cry from what status quo was. What was it, a year and a half, 2 years ago or so? Because back then, a normal live stream would get, in total, on a normal day, it would get like, I think, 50 to 75,000 views every day that it ran. And that was like 2.5 years ago, or 2 years ago or so. Nowadays, every stream gets around, I think it's like 150,000 views or more as a base level these days, which is 3 times the amount. And it's really crazy to look at that and think, damn, it's like that's just happened over 2 years. I mean, like, it's a huge thing these days. It's really hard to even wrap our minds around it. I know it's hard to wrap my mind around it, because it's hard, folks, to imagine 609,000 people all in one place, because that's larger than most ground armies on the planet right now. I know that's larger than the U.S. Army, the regular army. That's as large as it. So it's really hard to imagine what in the world would 609,000 people in one place look like, in one big group, and all those people are subscribing and watching the show. It's just very hard to imagine that at this point. And I like to say this, and I still believe it, that I like to think of y'all outside of just like a giant group or like a blob of numbers. I like to try and think that there's a lot of cool people, the hundreds of thousands of y'all, each with your own unique stories and your own journeys of your life that have brought y'all here to watch this show, and a lot to learn from each and every one of y'all. But it's so hard to even think about getting to meet the majority of y'all, because there's just so many nowadays. Like, it's crazy.
Man. I get a chat with the folks every single night, because I'm not having to like monologue most of the time. I add in on the polls, add in pieces and bits of analysis here and there and stuff like that. So I get to talk to people in the chat a lot more. So it's been really cool to get to know people over the years, like in the chat. Like, obviously we're not meeting face to face, so it's not like a in-person IRL like type deal relationship. But it's cool just to know people over the chat. Like, we've actually met some people in real life by just happening to run into people in real life, like that have recognized us and stuff like that, and also people that we're living in Alabama and other places where we've lived before. So it's been pretty cool to meet all the people through the stuff. We've met people we never thought we'd ever meet through the channel. Like some of them in the background that we can't mention on the air because they want their privacy for the most part. And some people are publicly, like, they'll be in the chat occasionally that y'all might recognize from other large YouTube channels that occasionally say stuff. It's been really cool to meet all these people, including just normal audience members every single day.
Yeah, it's super cool. And also, like, the stories of a lot of y'all's lives are just very interesting when we finally get to hear them. Like some people are race car drivers. We've had race car drivers, like Michelin star chefs. I mean, I would say Chef Danny B is certainly one of those folks. Like a great chef, a great cook. We've had people in here who've worked in the medical industry, who are in the military, who are currently involved in the government, who have been formerly involved in the government. I mean, we've had all different walks of life come through here, and and a lot of folks who live average yet very interesting lives. People who work all of the jobs that keep the gears grinding here in the background on the home front here in this country, all of the normal jobs that you would hear about, and a lot of them have very interesting stories as well about what they've done. It's just wildly fascinating. It's really cool, and I really wish folks, like, if I had a moment to stop time and to get to try and talk to each and every single one of y'all, I would, because I find talking to people fascinating and getting to know a little bit about them and their story and what they've done in their life that's gotten them to where they are. I find that stuff very interesting. I wish I could do that, but that's sadly beyond our technological capabilities at the moment, unfortunately. But anyways, with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here goes to none other than Game Theory. And thank you very much, Game Theory, for that 10. He said, have you seen the new drone-mounted flying guns? Elbit Systems launched their flying drone gun platform, the Bird of Prey.
I haven't seen that one, but I have seen the jank ones where the Ukrainians put an AK or a shotgun on the bottom of a drone and they start unloading that thing and folks or other drones. I have seen those, but I have not seen the Birds of Prey one, though. So I thank you greatly for the support and help this channel keep running. I'll have to definitely look into that one here soon. And so with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a $10 support from Game Theory once again, who said you should broadcast on other platforms like Twitch and Kick, more audience participation.
We could, but generally we like to be focalized on here on YouTube. It's kind of like our stomping grounds. And also on top of that, those other networks might have, or not really networks, but those other sorts of broadcasting platforms, they might have an issue with the content we broadcast, which could also become a pretty big problem for us. So generally we're kind of just happy being right here on YouTube. But big thanks to your support and the kind suggestion there. And with that, we're on the next one.
We actually turned down one of them. I won't mention which one it is. It's not the ones you mentioned, by the way. It's neither one of those that made an offer. But there was another platform out there that I won't mention, but people might make the inference that gave us an offer to go to their platform. And we were like, we don't want to have like a certain like idea that we're related to a certain platform that might have a political leaning or something. We kind of just shied away from it for that reason. So we just kind of stayed on YouTube. So if there's ever a problem where we need to find a new platform, we'll either make our own platform or we'll do something like that. Like we'll always like keep this thing running one way or another. Like if something ever happened to the YouTube channel, we would find a way to transition it to something else. We would certainly, but there's also some platforms that we just simply don't want to be associated with. Like there's just a handful of them out there that we're kind of like, I'm not a big fan of that.
It's not OnlyFans. No, I see so many people say that in the chat. Yeah, it's not that. No, we didn't get an offer for that. I saw.
Why would they want us?
I don't know. It's like it's not that one though. But I saw someone a second ago in the chat say, have you had anyone follow your show who's been into that sort of a deal? I think there's been like one that we know of, but they followed us on Twitter, and I remember bringing it up to Matthew. I was like, "What is this?" I was like, "Who is this person?" And then we were like, "Oh," and so yeah, there has been like I think one that we know of, but I mean, literally, like I would say that our viewer base is about as broad and varied as it could get. Like if we were able to pull back the anonymity that's on this like channel's audience, you're going to find one person that is from every single walk of life and does every single sort of profession or job that you can imagine. Like that's the truth of it. That's what we found out over the years. I mean, there's people who watch this channel that are hard left, hard right, down the middle. Every single country in the world for the most part. I mean, even people from Iran, Russia, and China watch to some extent. Not a big part of the viewership. They're very small, but they do watch. You can find people of every single type of job, every single type of income bracket, extremely wealthy people worth hundreds of millions, and people who are, fighting and struggling like most people in this country to get by every day and pay the bills. You can find literally every different walk of life and every single different type of a person watching the channel. I think that's really cool too. Like, I think that's actually pretty neat because a lot of channels, they get like a specific group of people. Like they only are appealing to one group. We're really more so appealing to literally everybody, which I think is amazing. Because what many channels really get that kind of credit to say that people from every walk of life and every single facet of society watch the show. I don't really think there's a many out there that get to say that.
Yeah, I would say so, definitely. It's really interesting how it has turned into that, really. And also, by the way, like for most YouTube channels, the life cycle of the average YouTube channel, I think, what is it, like less than a year or something? Like is the
It's
average
like
life
2
cycle?
years or something like that, I think.
Yeah, it's a real feat, like to keep a channel running for a long term. It's very tough. Now we kind of have a little bit of a boost because we're in the breaking news category, so there's always news of some sort to cover. So it's a little bit of a different ball game with that. But it's tough to keep a YouTube channel going because part of it is making sure the news is reliable. Part of it's making sure that it's it hooks people enough to keep people coming back to it. And then there's another element of it of actually making it work as a job to support the people on the channel, like where it has to actually replace a real job, like out there in the real world. Because if it doesn't, then there's no time to actually dedicate to the YouTube channel. So you have to make all those things work in conjunction, or otherwise it falls apart.
Yeah, also, one thing that's a little interesting, someone said, how many people in the audience are women now? I remember it used to be 8%. Well, on the bright side, it is now 10%. So we've actually seen a 2% jump in viewers that are women watching. So apparently we're appealing to women a little bit more these days. It's kind of an ebb and flow thing, though. Like, that statistic actually changes monthly for the large part, because if I look at last month, let me see here. Let me go look at June. It was 9.2%. And in the month of July, it was actually 10%. So it kind of just fluctuates month to month, if we're being entirely honest, but it's somewhere in between the ballpark of 8 to 10%. And also,
Yeah,
interesting
I've
enough,
been trying to bring them in as much as I can.
man, I got to tell you, man, and I'm running them away. Like, man, oh, man, I'm telling you.
Man,
But
you know what's crazy though, and I know people are about to make jokes about this too, but I'm being like legit. I'm being real here. I'm not trying to make a joke or something like that. The women in the chat are the most active chatters in
they
the
are
live
actually,
chat.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. The women on the channel, the 10%, like it's a small, like the 10% is not obviously that's small by the 90% male audience that we have, but the 10% female audience is the most active in the live chat every single night, which is fascinating because a lot of the 90% of the male viewers, they don't say a word in the live chat. They just watch from their TVs. They're probably watching right now to like kicked back and watching on their like sofa or something like that, but they're not chatting. But the women chat.
Yeah, the women actually chat a lot. Like, if you look into the chat, like, I would say probably like 1 in every 3 of the chatters are women, and the other 2 out of the 3 are men. But statistically, they only make up about 10% of the viewer base, so they're very well represented as far as like how talkative they are. Like, they talk a great deal more than the male viewers do.
Why you gotta put it like that?
Well, that's just the fact. Like that's just the fact. I mean, they're really out there in the chat. I mean, they're probably like the most active chatters there is. I mean, that's basically the way you said it, man. What are you trying to set me up here? You trying to shut
No,
me up?
the last time I said that, I was like, the women are the most active in the chat. And I was just meaning it like very like innocently like that. And people were like, well, of course they're talking a lot in the chat because they're women. I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like, wait a minute. I was like, I didn't mean it like that. I was like being like legit.
I mean, I'm being legit. Like, I don't know what's the problem here. It's just
I was
statistical
just
fact
joking.
here. Look, I'm resigning. I'm just kidding, by the way. But anyways,
Resign.
yeah, it's time. It's time to put
You
out
don't
the.
resign.
It's time to put out the apology tweet. I'm so sorry. I've offended everyone. Yada yada yada. So I'm resigning. All that crap. And then you don't really resign. You just say it. Like, there's been a couple of
I
YouTubers
think
who
you're
have done that.
confused. You don't resign from this. You're in it for life. This is the LSA.
This is eternal service. There's no escape. Like,
1,000-year contract type beat.
actually, it's a 1 billion-year
A
contract.
billion year type. They're on a different level. I never heard of that.
Man, I don't even think that's a legally enforceable contract. I think that would be considered an undue
But
duration of
nobody's
time.
gonna sue because you know why? They got the best lawyers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah, actually, he's right, folks. He's right. But yeah, we don't get to resign, folks. There is no resignations here. LSA services for life. So anyways, with man, that almost sounds like a gang. On God, gang.
This is not a gang.
No, it's not. It's just a group of amazing people. But anyways, with that, we're on the next one.
We also have here a $5 support from Elite One Shot, and thank you for that $5 support. They said, "Thank you for the years of dedication, gentlemen."
We are more than honored. I think that's so crazy, though. It's been years. Years. People are saying years of dedication. I feel like it was yesterday that we only just made it to the 1 year anniversary, and it's been 4.5 years now. It's getting very close. As far as me having the YouTube channel and running it at all, I think that this is about the time where it's been 5 straight years. Although before the daily coverage, it wasn't every day. It was just kind of whenever I had free time, so it took up all my free time when I had it. But it's been every day now for 4.5 years. That is really crazy to think about. There are kids, folks, that were born when this channel went live for the first time daily 4.5 years ago that are 4.5 years old now, and they're about to be having their fifth birthday and getting ready to go to kindergarten a little bit sooner after that in a couple of months. That is wild to think about how long we've been on air, but I've been absolutely having a fun time doing it the entire time over all these years, and I would have never done anything different. So a huge thanks to you for the support, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one goes to the Vladinator, who puts in a 5 and said, "Sadly, if the U.S. can't handle Iran and have no strategy, then how could the U.S. have the resources to defend Australia, South Korea, or Taiwan?"
That's my concern, really. I would say I don't mean to even say this politically, but I have a feeling that by the time that war comes around, this president isn't going to be around. Because if I had to say wherever the point of failure is, it's probably with him. And that's not trying to be political. I'm just saying that out of everything that we've ever looked at and everything I've told you all over the past few months and pointed out how a lot of the failures that have been seen, it's institutionally impossible for these failures to happen unless if someone drew up the plans and they hadn't been involved as career professionals in those institutions. And all of that goes pointing back to the civilian officials that are around right now. So if they're not around in the future, it doesn't matter what party they're from. It just matters that they're not these people. As long as it comes around to
Well,
pass, then that we probably won't be seeing a lot of the problems we're seeing right now. Hopefully, at least in terms of actually fighting the war, the back end problems will still be there probably.
but to be fair, though, I don't think the last administration would have started the Iran war. Which, by the way, starting the Iran war is not the problem; it's the way it's been handled is the problem. That's where the problem came into play. But the drone problem and the lack of drone technology that the U.S. is currently fielding, at least in a large like operational sense, it would have been a problem with the last group of people that was defense secretary and State Department officials. It would have been the exact same problem there as well. I mean, the last group of people that was in charge, they sat there and watched the same advancement of drone warfare that this current administration's watching, and they still didn't develop anything to a large degree. They didn't take the FPV technology from the Ukrainians and start fielding it. They didn't do that either, and neither is the current one.
I would agree. But the thing is, though, is that it generally, and I don't mean to sound, folks, and as far as I'm saying this, I'm kind of just being a bit of a devil's advocate here, so I don't mean to sound like I'm trying to remove any of the blame from the last administration, because I'd say they are to blame here, but it's really the job of a new president, if there is a shortcoming from the last one, to start fixing that, and the current one isn't fixing that really in any way that we can see either. It's like, it's basically like the same aloof mindset the last administration had of, oh, well, eventually we'll get around to that, and if we don't, it's fine, it's not even a big deal, but we'll just look into it because this is something that those stupid Ukrainians are doing. So it's probably not even applicable to us because we're just so great. We can never be hurt by that, like that sort of warfare. And that's the mindset the last administration had. And that's the mindset that the current one is continuing on with. And neither of them have done anything to address it. Like the current one could at least get some saving grace if they were in the war and we were saying, well, they're not really doing that well with drone warfare, but they are working literally day and night to get it off the ground in the background. But they're not even really doing that. I mean, they're just kind of sitting around going, oh, well, we might, and then they're still looking for really expensive systems that don't apply in the modern field. There's just still a whole bunch of problems. But one thing I will say, though, as far as what I was saying, is how in the world does the United States defend Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, and Australia? It's not really about that back end problem. That back end problem might exist until we get into a war and really get our asses beat very badly, and then we get kicked into high gear immediately because of that, because now we're looking at a significant threat and a risk that's happening every day. What I'm saying more so, though, is that the current administration and this whole wake up, bomb them, go to sleep, wake up next day, go to peace peace deal for 2 days and then bomb them again, and that whole indecisiveness that's screwing us over, and also the fact that they're involved in basically drawing up the strategies from top down, it seems, without any real martial experience, and it doesn't really seem like they're listening to anyone from what we can tell. That sort of a side of the things that will be done with. The back end thing might still be there, and that would still be a big issue and an Achilles heel. But the other Achilles heel of just the actual conduct of the war going so poorly, hopefully that would not be there. Because I will say that career politicians are generally looked at these days as not that high regard. But one thing I will say in the benefit of career politicians is that they have been around the block long enough to know that if something is done, that it has to be done to completion, whether that's a good thing or not. And career politicians don't wake up every day and decide something different every 24 hours. That's one thing I will give them the positive of, at least. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Toxic Pineapple, who said, I'm tired, boss. LSA all the way.
We're all tired, boss, like we are. But LSA all the way indeed. And a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Game Theory. He said, the president just posted on Truth Social his picture with Washington and Lincoln.
That's nothing new. Honestly, that's not even the worst. I think, what was it, a couple of months ago, he was Jesus or something. So at least he's kind of downgraded, at least, to just being the president again. But the next day afterwards, he'll be claiming he's God or something. You never know. It's nothing surprising. I'll say that. But a big thanks to your support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a 5 from Wee Little Turtles, and thank you for that support as well. They said, full disclosure, I'm a woman. I mean, I can check again. Oh,
Wow.
maybe I need some big T. I don't know if they're giving out the testosterone to the women. I don't know. I don't know if that's a great idea. I don't know. When the military's checking people, I don't know if they specified if it was just for the males or the women. I'm not really sure if they specified that. I mean, maybe they want the manly women. There's no telling. But Enforcer, what say you?
Man, they're gonna come into the Dutch office. We see that you're low on testosterone, but I'm a woman. Yeah, that's also a problem. It's like, what the hell are they gonna tell them? It's like, I don't even know. It's like, honestly, also, by the way, folks, I haven't heard a single soul. I literally have not heard a soul say that the whole high tea thing is a smart idea. And I have a lot of people that I know that I talk to that are in the service of all branches, and I have not heard a single one of them say that that's a good idea. Every one of them's like, that's just stupid as hell. What is this? And that's been getting a lot of them very aggravated. But anyways, a big thanks to your support and help this channel to keep it running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Game Theory, who said, I'm obviously not wishing it, he says, but do you think that if unfortunately a Pearl Harbor-like attack happens again on the U.S., will that change the military spending on drones?
I think it might, but with how the military is just, well, not really the military, but with really more so how the civilian side of the government's been handling this lately, it could, because that could be their wake-up call, because sadly a lot of wake-up calls happen when a large amount of people end up getting killed, which is a tragedy that it has to happen that way. But it could be a wake-up call for them. But I feel like a lot of people in most militaries around the world, especially in the European militaries, they have a clear grasp because they're getting hands-on knowledge from the Ukrainians every day, and they're really trying to listen to it a lot, how big of a game changer the drone warfare really is. And so hopefully we'll see that eventually that kind of thinking makes it to the States at the political level, in the civilian elected officials positions, and also the military, so that way the whole thing can work towards actually implementing that force-wide. So a big thanks to your support and help this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on and into the live chat section. So what do we got here?
So jumping into our Morse code decoders of the night, we had Paul, Kevin, Mason, Joni, Norm, Arabelle, her Royal Fluffiness, as well as Kush, Katerix, Sire, and Brian. And he said, the Morse code said, when will these Russians ever learn they got to stop all this fighting in LT, LSA?
And that's the sound of money. Y'all got it dead on the nail. That's the Morse code message of the night. I got to congratulate y'all greatly for getting that correct time and time again. Truly a fantastic and amazing thing right there. And I got to say, the least Spanish Core, they never miss a single Morse code message. Holy smokes, they do amazing. And so with that, it's time for us to get on into some live chats. Matthew, what do we got here?
And our first one goes to Radiz for Rubes, who said, any sign yet of the 30,000 North Korean troops walking to the front yet?
I haven't seen them yet. They're probably still on the way. They're probably over in Eastern Russia getting their equipment from the Russians again, maybe. So I hope that does address that well, and we're on to the next one.
We also have here a question from Jake, who said, "Why are 50-year-old Patriot missiles so important still? And politicians and media wants to think it's such a complicated tech. An AI missile will outperform them, and Ukraine can do it." Well, it is truly a complicated technology. Like, I actually will have to disagree a little bit. Those are complicated systems. I mean, you have to imagine. I mean, this is a full-size missile, changing course to intercept another missile coming into a target. So it's pretty advanced. I mean, to be able to do that, I mean, that takes a lot of different algorithms. It takes targeting systems, optical systems. I mean, that's a lot of technology to actually shoot down a missile like that. So that's why so many people use it and are reliant upon it, is because it takes a lot of money and time to develop systems like that, which is unfortunately why Ukraine can't really develop their own, at least right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
Also, another thing to add in is that while the Patriot system is as old as the early 90s, so it's about getting up to about 40 years old at this point. The thing we have to remember is that the missiles that they're using are fairly new. Pac 3s have only been around for, I believe, about 10 to 15 years. And in military terms, that's a fairly new sort of a missile that they're using. And it's a lot more advanced than the Pac 1 iterations that they had back in the early 90s. So I would have to say it's actually a pretty complex sort of a thing, especially the Pac 3s. They're extremely complex in what they're able to do and how they're able to perform. But the problem is that the Ukrainians being able to make a system like that is proving to be difficult. They're actually having to require, from what we know, a lot of European assistance in doing it, and they look to be trying to create some version of the Iris-T or the SAMP-T, which are the German and French equivalents of the Patriot system. So I hope that does address that the best we can, at least from what we know. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have one from Measure Man, who said, "Have you seen the drones that look like birds and ducks? LOL."
Yeah, the Chinese have those for reconnaissance. Like they've shown them off a little bit. Those things are so goofy looking. It's like those little toy, like RC planes you get as a kid that were like birds and whatnot. It's absolutely silly, but apparently they work.
Yeah, and also like speaking of bad camouflage, those drones may have bad camouflage as birds and ducks, but also I remember when we went to go see the White House, like what was it, like 7, 8, 9 years ago or something like that, and we were walking around the perimeter when you used to be able to walk around the perimeter. Now they won't let you get anywhere near it. But there was like a beehive, like one of those like Winnie the Pooh style like fake looking cartoon beehives, like in a tree. And I was like, what the heck? I was like, what are the odds of a beehive of this level of cartoon perfection being right here on the White House grounds like this? And then it looked like there was a camera moving around in it. I was
Yeah.
like, what? I was like, it's like a beehive camera like hanging out of the tree. It's like, that's the worst camo ever. I'm like, first of all, this is not normal to see a beehive this perfect sitting out in the open. So, I mean, this bad camo.
Man, it was a brutally bad camo. I mean, I remember looking at that thing too. The little like cartoon beehive hanging off of a tree limb with a big camera in it. Like it's like the hole where the bees are supposed to go in the cartoons. It's a big giant camera lens in it. It's like how that doesn't really scream like secret. And man, then you watch the documentaries about the White House, the Secret Service is like, we've got surveillance systems that we're not even going to tell you about. It's like, you don't have to tell me. I already saw it. It was the beehive camera, classic trick. Like, man, it's like, nothing crazy there. Beyond that, outside of all that, though, the Patriots are fairly advanced. So I hope that does address that the best we can. And with that, we're on the next one.
We also have a question from Elwood, who said, "Is NATO afraid of taking action to oust Putin because they're afraid that his successor will be worse?"
They're afraid to take action against Putin because Putin has an ability to start nuking NATO forces if we try to, and also conduct a strategic nuclear exchange, which would generally wipe out most modern semblance of life in the Northern Hemisphere, and also would end up killing about 2/3 of everyone in the Northern Hemisphere within the next 2 years. So only a third of people would be left alive after a nuclear exchange. That's really what stops us, is the threat of their nuclear weapons. And I know a lot of people are going to say, most of them probably don't work. And that's true. Most of them probably don't work. But it only takes a few hundred to be able to destroy the United States of America. And out of the thousands of them that they have about 6,000 of them. Even if only 10% of them were working, they still have 600 nuclear warheads. And that is more than enough to destroy the United States and also have a couple of hundred left over for Europe. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have one from Skip Timber, who said, "Hello from the UK again. And is it correct that the U.S. lost 3 F-35s last night?"
No, no. We lost one at San Diego. It had some sort of an engine issue, and the pilot ejected from the aircraft, and then it basically just burned off the tarmac. But no, we did not lose 3 F-35s. We only lost one, and that was due to some sort of a technical issue or a difficulty. So I hope that does address that well. And also a big shout out to you from the UK, Skip Timber, from the United Kingdom. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one is going to go to none other than Arar, who said, "Have we heard any more Hormuz mines going off, or the IRGC adding more to the soup?"
We haven't heard of them adding more to the soup, but we haven't also heard of anyone getting rid of them. Like, that's also another important note. As Al Rose just threw in a 333. Holy moly!
What are you doing, Hal? What are you doing?
Hal!
He's getting us a 3,000.
Sam! What are you doing with that hot dog, Sam? I wish I could show you
What's he
that clip.
doing?
Oh, he was just holding it, remember?
Oh, yeah. Oh, you're talking about that meme, the dog holding the hot dog?
Yeah, let's Sam, what are you doing with that hot dog? Let me see if I can show it. See, here we go. Maybe I can get a picture of it. Yeah, look, see, Sam, what are you doing with that hot dog, Sam? And he was just holding it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember this one now.
Man, next thing you know, man, I'm going to have to also reference, man, I wake up, it's the first of the month, they're paying that rent. But anyway, so that, a big shout out to you, Hal Rose, for that unbelievably massive support. Unbelievable. And you've almost gotten the fundraiser up to $3,000 raised. It's $2,971 raised at this point. And so with that, I hope that does address that humongous support of the fundraiser incredibly well. And with that, we're on to the second to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Old Warrior, who said, "How are we supposed to conduct a war when our allies tell us to back down because they fear threats by Iran?" And that's what I'm saying. That's a good point, Old Warrior. That's what I was saying earlier. That was my point. There's always somebody showing up, and I get the fact they don't want the Iranian retaliation coming their way. I'm like, that makes sense. Like, they don't want it coming their way. Like, for example, Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, Pakistan, and everybody else. But the problem is, though, it's like every single time the U.S. actually gets on the verge of actually finishing the job, there's always at the request of Pakistan, at the request of Saudi Arabia, at the request of Kuwait, or the Gulf State Alliance. It's like, there's always somebody showing up to say, let's not finish the job. It's like, well, I'm like, we know why they don't want to finish it. They don't want the trouble, and they don't want to have to fight for themselves. But it's like the U.S. is getting hurt in the meantime. So it's like, we got to finish the job. And if y'all need to defend yourselves, you're going to defend yourselves. The war got started. It's underway. I mean, we got to get ourselves out of the situation. But Enforcer, what say you?
Well, I would say we'd generally be able to remove a lot of their apprehensions if we give them proper security guarantees and also keep them in the loop on what we're going to be doing. Because that seems to be the big problem of why they keep freaking out and crashing out like this, is that the U.S. isn't really telling them squat. And we're also not giving them any security guarantees because these countries are taking on significant risk by having U.S. forces based in their countries, which they don't have to allow. Israel doesn't allow U.S. forces to be based in their country, yet we give them endless amounts of weapons. And with the Middle Eastern countries, even if they expelled us out of their countries, we'd still probably give them a lot of weapons, because the alternative is we cut off weapon shipments to them, and then they go to the Chinese, and we just lost the Middle East, which would be a detrimental outcome. So as long as we kept them apprised of the situation, actually informed them of what we were doing, and followed a reasonable sort of a plan, instead of, just trying to conduct scorched earth against the Iranians and blowing up power plants and oil refineries and things that aren't going to produce immediate results but create a hellfire from the Iranians on the Gulf states. If we continued our military campaigns against the IRGC and open up the Strait of Hormuz for the flow of oil to return, they would be more in line, they'd be easily in line in support of that, because it's helping them out economically, and it's also helping us out, and it also is mitigating the chance that Iran's going to start doing absolutely insane stuff to them, and they would also feel confident because we're giving them security assurances that we will protect them if the Iranians try to attack them. So that would generally be the approach I take, because right now the reason why they keep doing that is because they're learning that we're bombing Iran at the same time we're all learning when the U.S. is about to bomb Iran, which is kind of ridiculous considering we're basing on their soil. But I hope that addresses that well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $5 super chat from Game Theory, who said, if the U.S. vice president takes over somehow, do you think the Iran war would be going better? Now, if he took over, he would listen to the advisors a lot more closely. Not because he necessarily is not confident in himself necessarily, but it would be more like he's sort of out of his element to a certain degree. I mean, I've noticed just sort of studying how he's been sort of behaving like throughout these negotiations that are taking place. He seems kind of out of his element, to be perfectly honest. Especially when Iran snubbed him in front of all the Gulf State Alliance at that little meeting they had. He seemed really out of his element. And then they interviewed him, and he really didn't have a whole bunch of answers for anything. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if maybe he took the presidential position. Maybe he would actually like get more confident in what he's doing. But I don't know. Like I'm not so sure. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say probably, because regardless, I got to say this, folks, regardless whether you like him or not, he is a career politician. So he generally is used to actually having to keep other things in mind, to put it that way. So he would listen to advisors. And he'd also understand, because to kind of put it this way, he's not as narcissistic as other people, that it isn't all about being a genius and it isn't all about him. At least that is a positive. So I would say it'd probably be going better, at least in starting the war and not ending it until it's finished. Um, but honestly, the other thing is, though, is that right now, and, kind of speaking of Joe Rogan, Vance went on the Joe Rogan podcast and spoke about his position on the war in Iran. And basically, to surmise it, he kind of said that he wasn't really a big fan of it all. And he's much more of a fan of just ending the war and kind of just getting a deal with the Iranians, which would basically just be capitulation and rounding the whole thing out, which is a
I wonder
very
why.
bad. Mhm.
I say I wonder why. I don't really take that at face value. I think he's trying to position himself to run for president.
Oh yeah, I think so as well. But also it's like, what if that really is his intention? And it's like, well, that's an absolutely ridiculous one. It's like, what the hell will we gain from that? It's like we're giving away a vital waterway to an enemy state. It's like that wouldn't be a good result at all. But if that's not what he really is thinking, then at least the war wouldn't be fought every single day by someone who doesn't know what the hell they're doing and they change their mind every day. At least that would be a positive. If the war was fought at all. So I'll put it that way. So big thanks to you
I think if anybody's a politician right now that's in that whole environment and they want to run for president or have political ambitions, they're all going to want to distance themselves from the Iran war decision. Not because they necessarily think it was a bad decision to deal with Iran, because there was a lot of pressure to start that war from all kinds of different people and donors and politicians alike. But there was a huge amount of pressure, but they're going to want to distance themselves from it because it's gone badly and it's been handled awfully. So if you say, well, the war should continue, it's a lose-lose for a politician if they say that. But if they say, oh, the war was a bad idea, that positions themselves into an oppositional like frame where they can kind of say that guy made stupid decisions and that's why you should elect me instead. It's just like the classic, political flip.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like if we're being honest, his chances are slim. Like, these not even trying to be partisan with this. He's not really a popular person. And I don't think he has been for a while. I think his support base has kind of been his specifically has kind of been dwindling from what I've seen. And I think a lot more people, just being completely honest here, are more fans of Rubio than they would be of him. So if either one of them, because I think right now, folks, they're the ones that are kind of trying to groom themselves to run in the next election. I think generally, to be honest with you all, if those two candidates both ran in the primaries, I don't really think Vance would stand that much of a chance. At least in my opinion. So it's like even trying to position that way, it's like it's kind of a hopeless gambit because he's probably not going to be able to go up against his competitors in that primary. It just probably wouldn't work well.
It's identical to the last administration, actually, if you think about it. They're picking people that aren't exactly what they'd call strong picks because they're simply needing their votes from their constituents wherever they were currently serving from. They simply need those votes, so they just pick these people just for that reason primarily. Because I mean, the last vice president, she wasn't exactly what you'd call like a smoking hot pick. For a position like that, and neither is the current vice president either, which is kind of interesting because vice presidents have really changed roles in the modern day. It used to be the vice presidents just generally sat back and did nothing for the most part. They just waited for something to possibly happen that they would have to take charge, and they were just a backup option. These days, they take an active role. I mean, presidents use them as like the deputy secretary to the White House. Essentially, they put them in charge of projects and put them to work. Which it's never really been done quite that heavily before, and that's a very new concept. That's new to the last administration and the current one.
Yeah, I would say so. One thing that's going to be interesting though, folks, is what competitors might come out of the woodwork that haven't been associated with this administration at all, or really more so the really the only way to put it is kind of like the MAGA movement, because there's like I'll be honest with you, folks. I feel like there's a split coming up on that ticket, like in the next primary that's coming around, because there's a lot of people in that party that are not really a big fan of that movement anymore, and a lot of them are distancing. But it's not really it's really kind of in like a disjointed way. Some of them are going more extreme down certain ideological paths, and a lot of them are going more moderate instead. And then the support base of the current movement is kind of staying around. Man, I'm going to be honest with you. I think the next primary is going to be a very hotly contended one, because you're probably going to have multiple different, probably at least 3 different factions of different mindsets trying to vie for the candidacy for the party. So that might get quite interesting with that.
That would indicate to me there's just nothing but crappy candidates you're picking from if it gets really that heated. Like usually if primaries are like hotly contested, that means there's no front runner. That means they're all kind of equally unpopular and people are trying to pick from the garbage. But garbage is kind of like a strong word like to use, but they're trying to pick from people that aren't super popular. That's the kinder way to say it. So if there's a front runner, that means they're favored, and the primary shouldn't be that hotly contested. It's more of like a formality for the most part. I think most people these days, I feel like eventually there's going to be such a strong desire for an independent candidate eventually, because people are going to get so fed up with the two-party thing going on right now that give it 10 more years and an independent will have a real chance. If you give it 2 more terms of a president coming up, you'll probably have a real chance of the independent actually having a chance at winning the election.
But like speaking of that one party, my question is, folks, because right now you don't really hear a lot of the other party. Like we get to kind of see, and not of course getting into the partisan politics of it, just kind of speaking of the mechanics of what might be coming down the pipe. We get to see kind of a lot of the mechanisms, or really more so the movements in the Republican Party, because they're kind of at the forefront right now of everything, and especially everyone in the executive. But what I'm wondering is who in the world's going to be running for the candidacy for the Democrat Party, because you're not really hearing a lot about that. And of course, folks, there's like the usual. It's like Harris is going to run again and Newsom is going to try and give it a shot. That's what people are saying right now. But it's like, what are the other candidates who are going to be coming out? Because usually they have, because
None.
probably, I mean, maybe, because I'm not even hearing really
It's
of
just
any.
not
It's just those
possible.
two.
It's not possible anymore for that to happen. It used to be like, the common thing people have said is, oh, well, there's always somebody that comes out of the woodworks at the last minute, and then they jump in the primary, then they get the nomination, then they go to the general, and then they win the election. Like it used to be possible that would happen, but these days, with how heavy the whole donor system works, I mean, these old, tired, worn out people that are heavily like embedded in the system, those are the ones that the donors prefer because they know the devil they're working with. So they prefer just to promote the devil they know. So they put those same old tired people up over and over and over that clearly people don't want because they're not popular enough, but they keep doing it over and over. It's like why? It's like logically, if these people are not popular, then how come new entrepreneurial type politicians aren't popping up? That's because the system doesn't let them pop up. That's why. I mean, clearly there's people that would love to jump in there and try to, compete with them, but they simply can't. The money's not there for them.
I also see some people bringing up some options, uh, like, um, like AOC. But the thing about AOC is that she's from a smaller faction in the Democrat Party, and some people in the Democrat Party look at her as being too progressive. Like one thing that is interesting, to be completely frank with you all, and this is what makes it interesting from like a political science standpoint, to put it that way, is that the Republican Party is usually a lot more unified, and they kind of have whips, basically, that keep the folks in line over there a lot more. So they kind of run as like this unitary block. The other party, the Democrats, are a lot more decentralized, and you see different factions within them. Like you could call some of them like the traditional Democrats, and then you have the progressive Democrats, and you have a whole bunch of them. So, like, some of them are coming from the smaller side factions, kind of off in the side, that may not really have that kind of a chance. Like, they'll run, but, would they have a chance with the lobbying and the supporting and whatnot? It's hard to say. So, that would be my 2 cents on it. I see many saying, don't say names. What is this, the
Yeah, we're not
FCC?
smart.
Like, I mean,
Yeah,
but
not smart to name off specific people. That's where it starts getting into a absolute cesspit right there because people have strong feelings about these people, like people that you may not like. There's other people out there that would literally go to bat for these people. So we don't want to start mentioning specific people. I start
I'm
riling everybody up.
Well, I'm generally neutral to all of them. I'm not having any negative feelings. I'm just saying, as far as their party structure goes, she's particularly from one of the smaller factions. So, it's like, would there be a lot of funding support there? Maybe, but probably not.
I'll just, I have opinions about that, but I withhold it.
But anyways, also I see some people saying you're wrong about that. Well, I mean, not quite. I mean, like if you look at them in detail, you'll usually see. But I will say this though: in recent times, the Republican Party is kind of fractioning into different groups. But historically, they're usually like a block. At least in the past several days, it's kind of been a bit of a large block with a couple of dissenters. But nowadays, we're starting to see that it's beginning to have its own rift and its own factions are beginning to form and then fractionalizing even further from there. So an interesting time, at least in that regard. Also, Maddie, to add this, I don't think a moderate is, or like an independent, well, not a moderate, but an independent is going to have a chance. I have a feeling though that in the next 10 years, it's probably going to become the politically vogue thing for extreme moderates near independents to run for the candidacy for those parties, because that's usually how it's been done in the past, that independents don't make it, but if you basically run as an independent in one of those parties, you have a chance. I think that's
Yeah,
probably how
it
it
won't
ends
be
up.
allowed. It won't be allowed for the same reason they won't let new people jump in there that have new ideas. They simply won't let it happen. And then if for example there were a couple of outliers on because the only real primary there was last time was on the left. That's the only real primary that there was, and some people said that wasn't even really a primary. But there was a couple of outliers even there in that primary, and they just got shelved, like literally just shelved. Like they didn't really have a chance because the party said they didn't want them. So it didn't really come down to what the people wanted. It was more about the party simply booted them out, which is definitely not the way it's supposed to operate whatsoever. So yeah, I just think like I have a feeling that as this like deadlock continues on, as people get more and more fed up with the whole Republican versus Democrat thing, which I think is going to continue getting worse. Like people are getting very fed up with that because more and more people are starting to get exposed to how that system actually works, and it's really ugly how it works. And the more people that see that, just average everyday people, the more they're going to get fed up playing in that whole environment, at least I think. And also younger people are wising up to it as well because they're bearing like a huge portion of the consequences of it. They're seeing it firsthand. So I have a very strong feeling that like back when the Bull Moose Party came around, that what was that? That was Teddy Roosevelt that did that, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, when that came around, there was an appetite for it then. I think there will be another cycle like that coming up in the next 10 to 15 years or somewhere around that mark, where an independent party can rise up and it'll be extremely popular because people are so fed up with the other two playing BS games with people all the time that they're going to put them both aside. They're going to vote for that third party. I think there will be a huge appetite for that.
But the truth of that is, though, is that the Bull Moose Party really didn't have a good chance at winning. And if you look at the percentages and also the electoral votes that were seen in 1912 during that election, all the Bull Moose Party did was split the Republican ticket, and the Democrats basically had a sweep, and that's how Woodrow Wilson became president. So, like, if an independent ever came along, basically all that they're doing is splitting one of the tickets for one of those parties because they're going to appeal more to one of them than the other, and half of that voter base might hop over and vote for the independent, but that kind of is just shoehorning the other party, whichever one it is, Republican or Democrat, into basically a free win.
I think it'll be different this time around. I think it will be different because people are wising up to it. People truly weren't wise up to it or wise about it, like back during even the Bull Moose days. Like the fact the Bull Moose Party even got off the ground was a feat because I mean there was still the two party thing going on then too. So it was still a feat that it even got off the ground at all. But I think people will start wising up to it more this time because back in the day they didn't have social media. They didn't have any way to know what was going on. They simply saw stuff on a headline in a newspaper and that was it. These days they have social media. There's all kinds of like more cameras in situations where you can see how it actually works. And I think people are going to get fed up with it the more they see this thing not going anywhere, like the status quo is continuing.
I suppose, but this is the 1912 election right here. Funnily enough, the Republicans only won Utah and Vermont. Man, but the Bull Moose Party got 88 electoral votes. The Republicans actually got 8. And then actually there was a socialist running who isn't really ever talked about, but he was there. And then Woodrow Wilson won 435 electoral votes and basically kind of had a sweep because Teddy.
That's big though. I mean, that's for the Bull Moose Bar. I mean, that's pretty big what they won. You got to admit because I mean, look at a modern day independent movement right now. Like for example, what's one of them? I can't really remember them right off the bat. The Green Party is that? I mean, they don't get hardly anything.
But the thing is though, yeah, and they don't get anything. But the thing is that Teddy was a Republican, when he was the president. And so then he said, I'm stepping down after this one term because he was the president for 2 years before the election because McKinley was assassinated and he was the VP to McKinley. Then he got elected in 1900 and then he was the president until 1904. Actually, no, sorry, correction. I'm trying to think here. Actually, I think he was the president until 1908 or so. And then he said, I'm handing it over to my vice president, great guy, William Howard Taft, vote for him. So then the Republicans voted for Taft. And so during Taft's administration, Teddy Roosevelt got very disillusioned with what Taft was doing. He thought it wasn't in the interest of the country, and it was kind of reversing a lot of his policy points because he was more of a career politician for the time. It's kind of bought and sold back then. So then Teddy said, I'm coming back to the Republican Party, and I'm going to defeat him in the primary, and I'm going to be the Republican candidate for 1912. And the Republicans told him, that's just not happening. He wants to run again. He's the president right now. We're going to go with that. So then Teddy said, well, screw you. And this was very public at the time. I mean, this was written of in the papers. He said, well, screw you damn people then. I'm going to run my own party and I'm going to beat your ass in the election, or I'm basically just going to sink you, one or the other. So then that's when he created the Bull Moose Party, and that's why he had a chance, is because the Republican voters at the time were like, well, I mean, he was a good president when he was president, so we're just going to jump over there and vote for him. So he only split the ticket, really. That's why he made it so far.
Somewhat.
But outside of that, that's at least how I look at it. I mean, I'm a history major. You're a political science major, so maybe we have different outlooks on this because of that. But that's generally the historical lens of it. The political science lens could be different. But anyways, with that, I hope we've discussed that somewhat well. Interesting sort of a thing there. And with that, it is time for us to finally get on and into the final question of the night. And so, who was the last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And also a shout to Game Theory, put in it too and said Bullwinkle J. Moose for president. And I don't know if he'll have a chance. I don't know if anybody with the name Bullwinkle is going to be able to make it. I'm not sure. But thank you for that support once again. And also we have that final question, which goes to Tank Gunner, who said, if we get out of this Iran conflict with something resembling a victory, do you think Cuba or the cartels are next on the chopping block?
Cuba would probably be next, but I feel like that would be a tremendous mistake. There isn't really any strategic or economic value and engaging in significant hostilities against communist Cuba, at least for now. And so it probably would be Cuba. But I also say that that's a mistake. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to say that we're entirely honored and greatly appreciative of each and every single one of y'all being here tonight. We had 19.8 thousand people here at the peak, and 132,000 people have watched the stream and have raised a whopping $2,976 in support of none other than Nova Ukraine. And I gotta say a humongous thanks to everybody for supporting that fundraiser once again. That is truly incredibly kind and very compassionate of all of y'all. And with that in mind, we will see you all on Tuesday at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made, I'll be the one making that short war video. And so with that, folks, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Ukraini, Rom Slava, long live the Lead Spring Army, and of course, long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Eastern for the next Nightly War News stream, and maybe midday tomorrow for a short war video that Andrew will be making if there is enough news to cover. I'm going to have myself a nice little off day tomorrow, a nice little day, taking it nice and little easy. They say, sir, you got to get some rest, sir. You got to get some rest. It's tough getting old. I'm 26. It's a tough thing, sir. I might go golf. I might golf with a nice golf. That's a golf club. That's what they call it, a club, because you got to be in it to win it. But anyway, so we'll see you all on Tuesday night. And once again, a huge shout out to you all for making a successful fundraiser once again tonight, well above the goal. And a huge shout out to everybody for making that possible once again. And I hope to see you all on the next stream. But of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.